After a full day teaching classes at the public school, I arrived home exhausted. I saw a new lock on the pantry door. "It's so you don't touch our things," my daughter-in-law said without looking at me. I smiled without saying a word. The next day, the padlock was gone, and in its place, I left a letter, one that made her hands shake when she read it. Yes, that's exactly what happened, just as you are hearing it. A padlock, in my own house. On the pantry that I had built myself 25 years ago, when my Robert was still breathing and this house smelled of fresh brewed coffee and blueberry muffins in the mornings. But let me tell you from the beginning, because this story doesn't start with a padlock. It starts much earlier, when I still believed that being a good mother meant giving everything without expecting anything in return. My name is Eleanor. I am 67 years old, and for 42 of those years, I was an elementary school teacher at the Franklin D. Roosevelt School in a district of Chicago. I taught over 800 children to read. I gave them affection when their own homes did not. And I never, ever imagined that my own son would make me feel like an intruder in the place where I raised 3 children and buried a husband. That Tuesday, I arrived tired. My legs ached after standing all afternoon supervising recess. I was 65 then, just about to retire. I came in through the back door, as always, and went straight to the pantry to look for the peanut butter crackers I saved for my afternoon snack. My one little treat after a long day. And there it was. A new, shiny, silver padlock hanging from the door of my pantry, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I froze. My purse slipped from my shoulder. For a second, I thought I was in the wrong house, that I had mistaken the door. But no. There was the cracked tile next to the stove that Robert never got around to changing. There were the pots of basil on the window. It was my kitchen, my house. Then I heard her voice. "Oh, you're here." Victoria entered the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She was wearing that pink blouse that, according to her, cost $250 at a boutique in Beverly Hills. The same money I spent on groceries for the entire week. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the lock. My voice came out softer than I would have liked. I still didn't quite understand what I was seeing. She didn't even look up. "Oh, that. Well, Matthew and I bought some things for ourselves. You know, imported products, organic olive oil, that sort of thing. And well, we don't want them to get mixed up with everything else. It's to avoid problems." To avoid problems, as if I were the problem. "But Victoria, this is my pantry, my house." She finally looked at me, and in those brown eyes that once seemed sweet, I only saw coldness. "Oh, Eleanor, don't take it personally. It's just organization. You have your space, we have ours. It's the healthiest thing in a shared living situation, don't you think?" My space, in my own house. I wanted to yell at her. I wanted to rip that padlock off and throw it out the window, as if I were a tolerated tenant. But something inside me, that part that was always the teacher, the one who learned to measure every word before saying it, made me keep quiet. I smiled. "Of course, dear, whatever you say." And I went to my room. I didn't cry that night. I was too furious to cry. I sat on the bed I shared with Robert for 38 years, and for the first time in 3 years, I allowed myself to clearly see what I had been ignoring. My house was no longer mine. It hadn't happened all at once. It was like when mold gets into the walls. You don't see it until it's everywhere. If this story is stirring something inside you, subscribe to the channel, because what comes next, even I didn't see coming. 3 years ago, when Robert died of a heart attack while watering his geraniums, my world fell apart. I didn't just lose my husband. I lost the sound of his footsteps in the morning, the smell of his cologne when he got ready to go out, That way he hugged me from behind while I cooked. The house became a giant echo. Matthew, my youngest son, came to the funeral with Victoria. They had been married for 2 years. He hugged me and said, "Mum, we're not going to leave you alone. We'll move in with you until you're better." "Temporary," he said, "just until I recovered." But temporary turned into a month, then 6, then a year. And suddenly 3 years had passed, and they hadn't just not left. They had taken complete possession. At first it was subtle. Victoria started helping by reorganizing the kitchen. "It's just more practical this way, Mum." The antique serving dishes I inherited from my mother were piled up on the top cabinet where I couldn't reach anymore. My old but good frying pans were replaced by non-stick pots that, according to her, were healthier. Then came the furniture. "That couch is too old, Eleanor. We're going to donate it." And my brown armchair, where Robert read the newspaper every Sunday, disappeared. In its place, they put a modern grey sofa that was nice, yes, but it wasn't mine. The living room became her office. My sewing room was filled with boxes of her things. The dining room where we celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, was now decorated with abstract paintings that I hadn't chosen. And I, like a fool, let it happen. Because I thought it was love, that they were helping me modernize, that this was life with young people. But the padlock was different. The padlock was a message. That night, lying in the dark, I remembered something I told a student years ago. Her name was Lucy, and her older sister treated her badly, took her things, made her feel invisible in her own family. "Lucy," I told her, "never let anyone make you feel less in your own life, not even for love." And I had done exactly that. I looked at the ceiling. The shadows from the street lamp moved like ghosts. And then, for the first time in a long time, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt anger. And that anger, I would soon discover, was exactly what I needed to wake up. Because what Victoria didn't know is that teachers learn to read between the lines. And I had just perfectly read her message. What she also didn't know was that I also knew how to write. Stay tuned to see what I did with that padlock and what I discovered later on her laptop. The next day, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't had in years, like when you take off dirty glasses and suddenly see all the details you had been ignoring. I got up early, as always. I made my coffee in the old coffee maker they still allowed me to use, because the Italian capsule machine was only for them. I sat in the small space left for me at the breakfast table and began to remember. It wasn't sudden. It was like water eroding stone, drop by drop, until you no longer recognize your own house. I let my mind travel 3 years back, to the day of Robert's funeral. It was unbearably hot for November. St. Patrick's Church was full. Fellow teachers, neighbours, his domino friends, the ladies from the corner store where he bought his cigarettes. Secretly, because I scolded him. Matthew arrived with Victoria. She wore a simple black dress and her hair pulled back. She hugged me gently and said, "Count on me for whatever you need, Mum." Her voice sounded sincere, or maybe I needed to believe it was. After the burial, when everyone left and the house was left in that dreadful silence that only the recently widowed know, Matthew took my hands. "Mum, you can't stay alone, not now." "I'll be fine, son. Your father taught me to be strong." "I know, but we're going to stay with you for a while anyway, just until you recover. The house is huge, we have plenty of room." Victoria nodded beside him, with that smile that then seemed kind. "It's temporary, Eleanor. A few months at most. Plus, that way we save for the down payment on our own house, and you're not alone. It's perfect for everyone." Perfect for everyone. What a well-wrapped lie. The first few days were good. Victoria cooked, cleaned, accompanied me to teacher meetings when I didn't feel like going alone. Matthew fixed things around the house that had been broken for years: the water heater, the lock on the garden door, the leaks in the bathroom. I felt accompanied, less empty. But in the third week, Victoria started with her suggestions. "Oh, Mum, these curtains are so old. What if we buy new ones? I have a really good eye for decoration." They were the curtains Robert and I chose when we remodeled the living room, a terracotta colour that matched the tile floors. But I was so emotionally tired that I just said, "Okay, dear, whatever you think." A week later, my terracotta curtains were in the trash. In their place were minimalist white ones that let in too much light and made the living room feel cold. Then came the dining room. "These landscape paintings are totally outdated. Look, I bought these at a gallery. Modern art. They give it personality." The landscapes were of the California wine country, where Robert and I spent our honeymoon. Every time I looked at them, I remembered us in that small inn, laughing because we had gotten lost looking for a diner. But when I protested timidly, Victoria had already packed them. "Don't worry, I saved them in a box. Maybe you'll want to look at them someday." Someday. As if my own history was optional in my own house. The changes kept coming like waves, each one small, each one with good intentions. My collection of antique serving dishes. They take up too much space. Let's put them upstairs. My potted plants in the garden. They're too messy. I'm going to reorganize them. The bookcase in the living room with Robert's novels. These books are ancient. Should we donate them? And I, still stunned by grief, nodded. Because I thought I was being difficult, old-fashioned, clinging to the past. But the real change came when they started modifying the routines. Before, Sundays were sacred in this house. My two daughters, Chloe and Brittany, would come with my grandchildren. We would prepare turkey, mashed potatoes, whatever we craved. The house would fill with laughter, children running, that beautiful mess that is a family gathered. 3 weeks after moving in with us, Victoria suggested, "What if we just do family dinners every other week? It's just that Matthew and I need to rest on Sundays." Then it was, "What if we make it once a month?" And then we just stopped having them. One Sunday, Chloe arrived without warning with a cake and flowers. Victoria opened the door in pajamas, looking displeased. "Oh, Chloe, we didn't know you were coming. Nothing is prepared. Matthew and I were about to go out." My eldest daughter looked at me. I was in the kitchen, embarrassed, not knowing what to say. "I thought we still did family dinners," Chloe said, her voice tight. "Yes, but now we all live together. We need to coordinate better, don't you think?" Coordinate. As if seeing my own daughter required permission. Chloe left the cake on the table, gave me a cold kiss on the cheek, and left. She didn't return for 2 months. My friends suffered the same fate. My friend Rose, with whom I had coffee every Thursday for 20 years, stopped coming. The last time she arrived, Victoria was doing yoga in the living room with electronic music blasting. "Oh, excuse me, Rose, I didn't know you were coming. It's just that this is my workout time." Rose, uncomfortable among the mats and the incense Victoria had lit, drank her coffee quickly and left. "You should let me know when your friends are coming over," Victoria told me later without looking up from her phone, "so I don't interrupt my things." So she doesn't interrupt her things. In my living room. In my house. Little by little, my social life disappeared, and with it disappeared the witnesses to what was happening. But the worst was yet to come. The worst was when I started to notice that Victoria wasn't just changing the house. She was changing my son. Matthew had always been affectionate. He called me every other day before they came to live with me. He asked how I was. He told me about his job at the hardware store. He made bad jokes that made me smile. But now, living under the same roof, he barely spoke to me. He came home late from work and went straight to his room. If I tried to ask him about his day, he would respond with one-word answers. Fine, tired. We'll talk later. But that later never came. One night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom. The wall was thin. Your mother asked me if we can go with her to the doctor on Tuesday, Matthew was saying. And what for? She's an adult. She can go alone. Victoria, she's my mother. Exactly, she's your mother, not mine. I have enough to do working and keeping this house in order. I'm not going to be her nurse, too. There was silence. I waited for Matthew to defend me. I waited for him to say something, anything. But he didn't say anything. And in that silence, I understood something terrible. My son was choosing her over me. Not dramatically or cruelly, just with silence, with absence, with that letting her talk without contradicting her. I got into bed trembling, not from cold, but from helpless rage. The next day, I went to the doctor alone, and that's how everything was. Alone at the market, alone at the parent-teacher meetings, even though I was about to retire, alone in this house full of people that felt increasingly empty. Victoria started cooking only for herself and Matthew. She said it was because they were on a special diet. They left the dirty dishes for me to wash. They hogged the living room TV for their shows. They played music I didn't understand. They had visitors they didn't introduce to me. And I kept shrinking, becoming a little more invisible in my own life every day, until the padlock arrived. And that padlock was the final straw. Because I realized something. They weren't sharing my house, they were taking it from me. But what they didn't know is that I still had an ace up my sleeve, something that even Matthew didn't know. My son looked at me as if I were a piece of old furniture in the way, and that hurt more than 1,000 padlocks. Matthew was born on a summer morning in July, with thunder outside and my hand gripping Robert's until it was bruised. It was a difficult birth, 36 hours of labor. But when I placed him on my chest for the first time, with his eyes barely open and that cry that tore my soul apart, I swore I would protect him from everything. I never imagined that one day I would have to protect myself from him, or rather from his silence. Because Matthew didn't hurt me with shouts or insults. He hurt me by disappearing, by becoming a ghost who lived in my house, but no longer lived with me. It was Wednesday. I remember because on Wednesdays, I got home early from school at 2 o'clock, and I used to find him eating in the kitchen. We would talk about everything, about his work at the hardware store, how things were with his customers, that boss who, according to him, didn't even know how to hammer a nail. But that Wednesday, 3 days after the padlock incident, I arrived, and the house was silent. Victoria wasn't there. Matthew was. I saw him sitting in the living room looking at his cell phone with a frown. "Son," I said from the doorway, "did you already eat? I can make us some chili." He looked up for barely a second. "I'm not hungry, Mum. Thank you." And he went back to his screen. I stood there, my bag still hanging from my shoulder, feeling like I had just talked to a wall. "Are you okay?" "Yes." "Did something happen at work?" "No." "Matthew, look at me." He sighed, that long sigh you use when someone is annoying you. He put his cell phone on the sofa and finally looked at me, but his eyes were empty, as if he saw me but didn't recognize me. "What is it, Mum?" "That's what I'm asking you. We don't talk anymore. You don't tell me anything anymore. You live here, but it's like you're not here." He ran his hand through his hair, that gesture he's made since he was a kid when he was uncomfortable. "It's just that I'm tired. Work is hard. Don't take it personally." "Don't take it personally." the same words Victoria used about the padlock. What about Sunday? Chloe told me you invited her to eat with you, but you didn't tell me. His face changed. He tensed up. It was a last-minute thing. I thought you had plans. What plans would I have? I live here. This is my house. Mum, don't start. Start what? Wanting to talk to my own son? He stood up from the sofa. He no longer looked me in the eyes. Look, Victoria and I are trying to build our lives. We need space. We can't be thinking about, you know, about me. You can't be thinking about me. It's not that. Then what is it? Silence. That damned silence that had become his answer for everything. I have to go out, he finally said. Victoria is waiting for me. And he left, just like that, leaving me with words stuck in my throat and a broken heart. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed looking at the ceiling, remembering the boy Matthew was, the one who climbed into my bed when he had nightmares, the one who made me drawings in elementary school and proudly taped them to the refrigerator, the one who hugged me tight and said, "When I grow up, I'm going to build you a huge house, Mum, with a yard and everything." Where had that boy gone? The following days were worse. Matthew started avoiding me completely. He left before I woke up. He came back late when I was already in my room, and when we coincided in the kitchen or the hallway, he would look down and quicken his pace, as if I were an uncomfortable stranger. But what finally broke me was what I discovered a week later. It was Saturday morning. Victoria had left early for the hair salon. That weekly routine that, according to her, was indispensable and cost $80 every time. Matthew was in the shower, and I, cleaning the living room as I always did, found a manila envelope forgotten between the sofa cushions. I didn't want to snoop. I really didn't. But the envelope had the bank logo, and it was open. Inside was a statement from my son, and there was also a paper with my handwriting. A letter I had written 2 years ago, when Matthew asked me to borrow money. My hands started to shake when I read it. Mum, I promise I'll pay you back the $180,000 as soon as we get the loan approved. It's for the down payment on our house. Victoria and I already found one in the suburbs, perfect for starting out. I swear on Dad's memory that I will pay you back. I love you, Matthew. $180,000, the savings that Robert and I put together for years for our retirement. The money I was saving for emergencies, so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone in my old age. I lent it to him because he was my son, because I trusted him, because he told me it was for their house. But according to the bank statement I held in my hands, dated just 1 month ago, there was no house. There was a charge of $320,000 for a premium auto dealership. A car. They had bought a luxury car with my money and the bank loan, and they never told me anything. I felt the floor moving. I sat down on the sofa because my legs couldn't hold me anymore. I read the statement over and over, looking for an error, some explanation that wasn't the obvious one. But there was no error. My son had lied to me. He had used me. He had taken my life savings and spent them on a whim to please his wife. I heard the shower turn off, Matthew's footsteps approaching. I quickly put the papers back in the envelope and left it where it was. When he came out, with wet hair and a towel around his neck, he looked surprised. "Oh, you're here." "Yes, I was cleaning." He nodded, uncomfortable. He went to the sofa, took the envelope without saying anything, and went to his room. He didn't even pretend an explanation. That afternoon, when Victoria returned with freshly styled hair and bright red nails, I saw her differently. I saw her get into that latest model grey car parked outside, the one they supposedly bought with their savings. With my savings. And something inside me broke definitively. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal. It was knowing that my own son saw me as a bank, as someone he could take from without giving, as someone whose needs didn't matter. That night, while they ate dinner in the kitchen, talking and laughing as if nothing had happened, I stayed in my room. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. Instead, I felt something cold and clear, a decision forming like ice in my chest. I opened my closet, I moved the old shoeboxes, and I took out the blue tin box my mother inherited to me before she died. Inside, there were things Matthew didn't know about, things Victoria would never imagine. Documents, deeds, and a will that was still in my favor. Because it turns out my son forgot something very important. This house had an owner, and that owner was still alive, still sane, and now very, very angry. What came next, neither they nor I saw coming. But when I did it, it changed everything forever. At the back of my closet, I kept something they didn't know existed. My true power. The blue tin box was barely 12 inches long. It had faded flowers painted on the lid and a small dent on the corner, a memory from when it fell during the move to this house 25 years ago. To anyone who saw it, it was just an old, worthless object. But for me, it was a war chest. I took it out that Saturday night, after discovering the truth about the money. I placed it on my bed carefully, like someone unearthing something sacred. My hands trembled as I opened the rusted lid. The smell of old paper hit me first. Then I saw what was inside. Yellowed envelopes, carefully folded documents, photographs, and a small black notebook with frayed corners. My mother's notebook. There, in her precise, slanted handwriting, were noted all the lessons she gave me before she died. Eleanor, she told me on her last lucid day, her eyes dimmed by cancer, but her voice firm. Never ever let anyone think you are foolish just because you are kind. Kindness is not weakness, and a woman who knows how to keep silent at the right time is more dangerous than 100 shouting men. I smiled at the memory of her. My mother had been a teacher too, and she taught me that information is power. I took out the first document, the house deed, original, sealed, notarized. In my name. Eleanor Monica Salazar, widow of Guzman. Not a single letter mentioned Matthew or Victoria or anyone else. This house was mine, completely, without debts, without mortgages, without conditions. I had inherited it from my parents when they died, and Robert and I remodeled it with our own savings. Every brick, every window, every bathroom tile had been paid for with the sweat of 2 teachers who worked 40 years non-stop. Matthew knew it, or at least he once did. But perhaps Victoria had made him forget it. Or perhaps he had chosen to forget it because it was convenient for him to think this house would be his someday. I took out the second document, my will. I had drawn it up 5 years ago, when Robert and I decided to put everything in order. Back then, it left the house divided equally among my 3 children, Matthew, Chloe, and Brittany. But that will could be changed. And a dark part of me, the one that had been dormant for too long, started to seriously consider that possibility. I kept checking. I found copies of the electricity, water, gas, and property tax bills, all in my name, all paid by me for the last 3 years, even though Matthew and Victoria contributed $1,500 monthly, which barely covered the groceries. $1,500. A mockery. The property tax alone cost $3,200 every 2 months. Electricity, $1,800. Gas, $1,100. Maintenance, repairs, unexpected expenses, All of that was paid by me with my teacher's retirement. $11,000 monthly that evaporated maintaining a house for 3 people where only I put in real money. But the most interesting thing was at the bottom of the box. A white business card with blue letters. Franklin Foster, attorney and notary, family and estate law. Franklin had been a third-grade student of mine more than 30 years ago, one of the most respected lawyers in the district, and he owed me a huge favor. I had convinced his mother not to take him out of school when she wanted to put him to work. "Teacher Eleanor," he had told me at Robert's funeral, squeezing my hand tightly, "anything you need, anything at all, just look me up. You changed my life." I looked at the card. Then I looked at the documents. And then, for the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't sadness or rage. I felt control. The next morning, Sunday, I waited for Matthew and Victoria to leave. They had arranged to go to brunch with her parents, another one of those gatherings to which I was never invited. As soon as I heard the car drive away, I took my cell phone and dialed Franklin's number. He answered on the third ring. "Teacher Eleanor?" "Franklin, dear, forgive me for bothering you on a Sunday." "You are never a bother. Are you okay? Did something happen?" The genuine concern in his voice almost made me cry. It had been so long since someone truly worried about me. "I need your help. I need to review some documents and maybe, just maybe, make some changes." There was a pause. "Changes to your will?" "Among other things." "Can I ask what's going on?" And then, sitting there on my bed with the blue box open in front of me, I told him everything. The padlock, the humiliations, the $180,000, the way my own house had become a prison where I was the intruder. Franklin listened without interrupting. When I finished, his silence was different. It wasn't discomfort. It was someone calculating, thinking, planning. "Teacher, do you have proof of all this?" "I have receipts. I have the bank statement I found. I have text messages where Matthew promised to pay me back the money." "And is the house completely in your name?" "Completely, no debts, nothing." "Perfect." His voice sounded firmer. "Then this is what we're going to do." For the next hour, Franklin explained a plan to me. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. It was setting legal boundaries that Victoria and Matthew couldn't break. First, update my will with a different notary, one they didn't know. Leave everything to my daughters, with a special clause stating that Matthew could only inherit if he paid me back the $180,000 before my death. If he didn't, his share would be divided between Chloe and Brittany. Second, make a notarized inventory of all my belongings inside the house. Furniture, appliances, jewelry, everything, to make it clear what was mine and what was theirs. Third, prepare a legal ultimatum. If they didn't start paying a fair rent, calculated at $500 monthly, which was cheap for a house that size, or didn't move out within 3 months, I could initiate an eviction process. "But Franklin," I said, my voice shaky, "he's my son." "I know, teacher, and that's why I'm giving him options that aren't throwing him out on the street tomorrow. But you have to protect yourself. What they are doing to you is not love, it's abuse." That word hit me like cold water. Abuse. Was it that? Could it be called abuse when it came from your own son? "Think about it," Franklin continued. "But don't take too long. The more time passes, the harder it will be to get your house and your peace back." We hung up. I remained sitting on the bed, surrounded by papers, feeling like I had just crossed an invisible line. But the line had already been crossed, only not by me. I put everything back in the blue box. I hid it in the back of the closet, behind the winter boxes that no one touched. When Matthew and Victoria returned that afternoon, they found me in the kitchen, preparing chicken soup, as always, like the harmless old lady they thought I was. "Smells good," Matthew said, surprised to see me cooking. "I thought we were supposed to be dieting," Victoria added in a sharp tone. I smiled. That smile I had perfected in 40 years of dealing with difficult parents. "It's just for me. You two do your own thing." Victoria blinked, confused by my neutral tone. Matthew looked at me with something that almost seemed like guilt, but neither of them said anything, and I continued stirring my soup, calm, while in my mind the pieces were already moving on a board they didn't even know existed. Because I had learned something important. The one who shouts the loudest doesn't always win. Sometimes the one who knows how to wait in silence wins, with a teacher's patience and a surgeon's precision. And I had waited long enough. But before taking the next step, something happened that almost ruined everything. Something that made me question whether I truly knew the people I lived with. That day, in front of the whole family, they treated me as if I were nothing. But I let them talk, because every word was a rope with which they were hanging themselves. It was Matthew's birthday, 35 years old. Before, these dates were sacred in our family. Robert would wake up early to hang streamers. I would bake his favourite cake. Strawberry shortcake. Chloe and Brittany would arrive with gifts wrapped in shiny paper and hugs that lasted forever. But this year was different. "I'm going to organise something small," Victoria told me 2 weeks earlier, while painting her nails in the living room. "Just us and my family. Something intimate." "What about the girls?" I asked, referring to my daughters. "Oh, Eleanor, you know how it is. They always end up arguing over silly things. Better to avoid drama." They weren't arguing over silly things. They were arguing because Victoria treated them with the same disdain she showed me. But Matthew never defended them. "What about the food?" I tried again. "I can make the turkey and mashed potatoes that Matthew likes, or some lasagna." "Don't worry. I'm going to cater everything. You just relax." Relax. As if I were a guest in my own house, on my own son's birthday. The day arrived, Saturday, April 23rd, sticky mid-year heat. From early on, Victoria began transforming the house. She took down the paintings I had discreetly rehung. She put up modern centerpieces with artificial flowers. She changed the tablecloths for minimalist grey ones that, according to her, matched the decor. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, invisible, while she ordered and organized in my house as if it were hers. "Matthew, move that chair. No, not there. More toward the corner. Perfect." My son obeyed without a word, moving furniture back and forth, sweating in a white t-shirt. "Do you need help?" I offered. Victoria didn't even turn around. "No, we're almost done." "Oh, yes. You could go to your room while we set up. It's just that we're going to use the living room and we don't want anything to get in the way." Anything to get in the way. Or anyone. I went to my room like a punished child. I closed the door and sat on the bed, feeling the heat rising up my neck, the humiliation, the contained rage. But I stayed quiet. I took my cell phone from the nightstand and put it on silent mode. I left it on my dresser, strategically propped against a book, with the camera pointing toward the slightly open door. I started recording. If my years of teaching had taught me anything, it was this. When someone is hurting you, document it. Words are forgotten, witnesses change their story, but a video doesn't lie. At 6 o'clock, the guests started to arrive. First came Victoria's parents, Mr. Jack and Mrs. Patricia. Yes, that was her name. And believe me, the name fit her perfectly for how unbearable she was. Mrs. Patricia entered wearing a floral dress and expensive sunglasses, carrying a cake from a fancy bakery. She looked at the living room with a critical eye, as if evaluating whether everything was up to her standards. "Oh, honey, you did a great job. Your good taste shows." Your good taste, in my house, with my furniture pushed into the corners. Then came Victoria's sister, Michelle, with her husband and their two spoiled children, who immediately started running around the house, shouting like animals. One of them knocked over my African violet plant. No one said anything. They didn't even pick it up. I stood in the hallway, dressed in my Sunday blouse and pearl earrings, waiting for someone to greet me. No one did. Victoria walked past me as if I were part of the wall. Mr. Jack looked at me sideways and nodded his head, but didn't say a word. Mrs. Patricia outright ignored me. Matthew? Matthew was too busy opening bottles of wine and playing music. I sat in the corner chair, the one they had pushed next to the bookcase, and watched. The dining table was full of food I hadn't cooked. Sushi, fine cuts of meat, gourmet salads, bottles of wine that cost more than $50 each, artisan bread, French desserts, all paid for with money they supposedly didn't have, the same money that justified why they couldn't pay me a fair rent. "Cheers to my son," Victoria shouted, raising her glass. "To his 35th birthday, and may this be the start of our best time together." Our best time. As if I hadn't been there for his first 35 years. As if I hadn't birthed him, raised him, educated him, supported him when he didn't have a job, consoled him when his girlfriends left him. Everyone toasted, the glasses clinked, laughter filled the room, and no one, absolutely no one, toasted to me. Then Mrs. Patricia, with 3 glasses of wine in her and that condescending tone people who think they are superior use, dropped the bomb. "Oh, Victoria, it's so good that you two are so patient. Not everyone can stand living with their mother-in-law, right?" She laughed that fake laugh that made my skin crawl. "You must be very grateful to them. Not all modern children sacrifice themselves like this, taking care of their parents instead of abandoning them somewhere. Sacrifice, taking care, as if I were the burden." Victoria smiled, looking down with false modesty. "Oh, Mom, she does what she can. It's hard at her age, right? But we manage, with patience." Mom. That word that had sounded affectionate the first few months and was now poison wrapped in honey. "The thing is," Michelle continued, pouring herself more wine, "I tell my husband that when his mother is old, there's no way she's coming to live with us. Straight to the nursing home. It's the healthiest thing for everyone." Laughter erupted. Matthew smiled uncomfortably, but he didn't say anything. Nothing. Mr. Jack added his 2 cents. "Well, I think it's fine to help up to a point, but there comes a time when old people have to understand that their cycle is over and let the young people live." The old people. They talked about me as if I weren't there, as if I were an object that eventually needed to be gotten rid of. Mrs. Patricia looked directly at me for the first time all night. "Right, Eleanor. You understand that they need their space. They're young. They have dreams. They can't be burdened with, well, you know what I mean." I remained silent. I smiled. That smile I had perfected in weeks of enduring insults disguised as advice. And I let them keep talking, because my cell phone was still recording. Every word, every cruel laugh, every derogatory comment. Victoria brought the cake. They sang "Happy Birthday." Matthew blew out the candles and made a wish. They asked him what he had wished for, and he, looking at Victoria with love in his eyes, said, "I wish we could have our own house soon, to start our life for real. Our life for real. As if these 3 years had been a lie. As if I were a temporary obstacle." I got up from my chair. My legs were trembling, but I kept my back straight. 40 years of standing in front of 30 children every day had taught me to have presence. I'm going to my room. Enjoy your party. No one stopped me. No one said, "Don't go." No one asked if I was okay. Victoria just mumbled, "Get some rest, Mum." I closed my bedroom door. I stopped the recording. 3 hours and 40 minutes of documented humiliation. I sat on the bed with the cell phone in my hands. I pressed play. I listened to everything again. And this time I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity, because they had just given me exactly what I needed. Irrefutable evidence that I wasn't imagining anything, that it wasn't my fault, that this was abuse disguised as shared living. I saved the video to the cloud. I made 3 backup copies. I sent one to Franklin Foster's email with the subject, "Urgent, additional evidence." Then I lay down, and for the first time in months, I slept completely, because I was no longer alone in this war. I had allies, I had proof, and above all, I had a plan. What they didn't know is that they had just dug their own grave, and I would hold the shovel. The next day, I did something Victoria will never forget. Something as simple as a letter, but as devastating as an earthquake. When Victoria read that letter, I saw the colour drain from her face, because the right words, spoken at the precise moment, are worth more than 1,000 shouts. Sunday dawned quiet, too quiet. That uncomfortable stillness that remains after a storm, when the air still smells of electricity and destruction. Matthew and Victoria didn't come out of their room until 11 o'clock. I had been awake for 2 hours. I had drunk my coffee, watered the plants I had left, and done something I had been planning all night. On the dining room table, among the remnants of the party that no one had cleaned up, I saw the padlock. They had left it lying there, next to the empty bottles and dirty dishes, as if it were trash. As if it hadn't been the symbol of my humiliation just days before. I picked it up. It was light, cheap. The kind of lock you buy at any hardware store for $5. Nothing special. But for me, it represented a line that had been crossed. I went to the kitchen drawer where I kept my tools. I took out some old pliers that Robert used for his household repairs. The lock gave easily. Too easily. With a little force and the right angle, the shackle opened without a problem. I smiled. That symbolic lock, so full of power in Victoria's mind, was worthless. It was pure theatre, pure illusion of control, just like everything she had built in this house. I left the broken lock on the kitchen counter where she would see it. But that wasn't enough. I needed to send a clearer message, more permanent. I went to my room. I took out paper and a pen. Not the computer, not a text message, a handwritten letter. Because there is something about handwritten letters that makes the words weigh more, that makes them stick deeper. I sat down at my desk, the same one where I had checked the homework of hundreds of students for decades, and I wrote, not with rage, but with surgical precision. Victoria, I have decided not to say anything about the padlock because I understand that you come from a family where distrust is normal. I don't blame you for that. Everyone brings their traumas and their ways of seeing the world. But I want you to know something very important. Something you may have forgotten, or that you were never clearly told. This house has an owner, and that owner is me. The documents are in my name. Original deeds, notarized, impossible to modify without my physical presence, my current ID, and my fingerprint. My lawyer, Mr. Franklin Foster, has certified copies of everything. And believe me when I say he is very good at what he does. I know about the power of attorney you wanted me to sign 6 months ago. That paper you accidentally left on the table with the important parts marked in yellow. I'm not foolish, Victoria. I'm a teacher. I taught over 800 children to read for 42 years. I can read between the lines better than you imagine. I also know about the $180,000 my son borrowed from me for the down payment on his house. That house that never existed. That money that turned into a car you drive every day. And I know what you said about me last night. I recorded every word. This is not a threat. It is information. Information that you need to have to make better decisions from now on. This is your only warning. If you try to put a lock on me again, literally or metaphorically, you will meet the Eleanor you do not want to meet. The one who, think carefully before your next move. With the cordiality I still have left, Eleanor Monica Salazar, widow of Guzman, legal owner of this house. I folded the letter into 3 perfect parts. I put it in a manila envelope, and in clear handwriting I wrote on the front, "For Victoria. Personal and confidential." I went to the pantry. The door was still there, unlocked, open as it should have been all along. I taped the envelope to the center, at eye level, with thick tape. Impossible not to see. Then I went to the kitchen. I prepared a cup of chamomile tea and sat down to wait. I didn't have to wait long. At 11:30, I heard footsteps. Victoria entered the kitchen, shuffling in her slippers, her hair messy and looking hungover. She headed straight for the coffee maker. Then she saw it, the broken padlock on the counter. She stopped dead. She picked up the lock. She examined it. She frowned. Then she looked towards the pantry, and there was the envelope. Large, manila, with her name on it. I saw her turn pale even before she opened it. She took the envelope with trembling hands. She opened it clumsily, tearing the paper. She took out the letter and started to read. I continued drinking my tea, seemingly calm, apparently distracted, looking out the window at the garden. But I was watching her reflection in the glass. I saw her eyes widen with each line. I saw her mouth open into an O of surprise. I saw her hands begin to tremble by the time she reached the middle of the letter. When she finished reading, she slowly folded the letter. She looked at me. I didn't look away from the garden. Eleanor. Her voice sounded small, scared. I didn't answer. Eleanor, I didn't... This is a misunderstanding. I slowly turned my head. I looked her in the eyes, and I didn't smile. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't smile. Which part is a misunderstanding? The padlock I saw with my own eyes? The money that your husband's bank statement proves? Or the things you said about me last night, recorded on video with the date and time? She was speechless. The letter trembled in her hands. We were just... Save it. My voice came out firm, cold. I don't want explanations. I want you to understand that this house is mine, that I decide who lives here and under what conditions. And if you disrespect me in any way again, you leave. No discussion. No second chances. But Matthew is my son, and he will always have my love. But this house is mine, and in my house there is respect. Or you find somewhere else to live. The silence that followed was dense, heavy, electric. Victoria pressed the letter against her chest. For a moment, I thought she was going to cry, or scream, or make one of those dramatic scenes she was so fond of. But she didn't do any of that. She just nodded, barely, almost imperceptibly, and she went to her room without saying a word. I heard the door close, then muffled voices, Matthew asking what was wrong, Victoria crying, explaining, maybe exaggerating. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was recovering something. Not all of my house, not all of my life, but a small, vital piece of my dignity. I finished my tea, I washed my cup, and I went for a walk in the neighborhood park, where no one knew me, where no one judged me, where I could breathe without feeling like the air was being rationed. When I returned 2 hours later, the manila envelope had disappeared from the pantry. The broken padlock was still on the counter, but now there was a note next to it, in Matthew's handwriting. "Mum, we need to talk." I took the note, I crumpled it in my fist, and I smiled. Because finally, after 3 years of silence, my son wanted to talk. And I had a lot to say. That conversation changed everything, but not in the way I expected. They thought I was scared, but I was just waiting for the perfect moment. Matthew's note stayed on the counter for 2 days. 2 full days where none of the three of us spoke beyond the strictly necessary. Good morning. Good night. Do you need the bathroom? Nothing else. The house became a minefield, where every step had to be measured, where every door closing sounded like a gunshot, where the silence was so dense it could almost be cut with a knife. Victoria avoided my gaze. When we coincided in the kitchen, she took what she needed and left quickly, like a scared mouse. She no longer played music loudly. She no longer reorganized my things without permission. She no longer made hurtful comments disguised as jokes. For the first time in 3 years, there was fear in her eyes when she saw me. And I won't lie, a dark part of me enjoyed that fear. But I knew this was temporary, that the initial fear would turn into resentment. That resentment would turn into strategy. That Victoria was not one to give up easily. So I didn't give up either. I started documenting everything. Everything. I bought a new notebook at the corner stationery store. Green with a spiral. On the first page, I wrote Household Expense Log, April 2025, and started jotting down every dollar that left my pocket. Electricity, $184.70. Water, $63.40. Gas, $112. Property tax, $320. Groceries, $450. Internet, $59.90. Phone, $25. Total monthly I paid, $1,215. Matthew and Victoria's contribution, $150. The numbers didn't lie. I was subsidizing their lives with over $1,000 monthly. And that's not counting the space, the furniture, the appliances, the use of the car they sometimes took without asking permission. But the numbers weren't enough. I needed more. I started recording conversations. Not all the time, only when there was something important. My cell phone was always in my apron pocket, in record mode, discreet. Like that Thursday afternoon when I heard Victoria talking on the phone on the patio. She thought I had gone out. She didn't know I had come back for my sweater. "No, Mum. I'm not exaggerating. She's become unbearable. Now she's acting like a vigilante, as if she were the owner of—" She paused. Someone said something to her on the other end. "Well, yes, she is the legal owner. But after everything we've done for her, right? We've been taking care of her, putting up with her old lady quirks for 3 years. Taking care of her. Putting up with. Old lady." I saved the recording with the date and time. I also started making copies of everything. Receipts, statements, messages. I kept them in a yellow folder that I hid at my friend Rose's house. "Are you okay, Eleanor?" she asked me while we had coffee in her kitchen, worried about the dark circles under my eyes. "You look different." "I'm getting ready," I simply told her, "for something big." I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. but I left her the folder with clear instructions. If something happens to me, you give this to Franklin Foster. He'll know what to do. Rose squeezed my hand, scared. Don't say that. Nothing is going to happen to you. I know, but it's always better to be prepared. Meanwhile, at home, I continued my act. I started feigning mild dementia, strategic forgetfulness, calculated confusion. "Oh, I already ate," I would ask at dinner, even though I had eaten perfectly 2 hours earlier. "What day is today?" I would murmur, looking at the calendar with a frown. "Where did I leave my glasses?" I would search all over the living room when they were hanging around my neck. I saw Matthew and Victoria exchange glances that said, "See? It's starting. She's losing it. Perfect. Let them think that." Because while they thought I was confused and weak, I was moving pieces on a board they couldn't see. I called Franklin 3 times that week. "I want to change my will," I told him in the first call. "Are you sure, teacher?" "Completely." In the second call, I asked him to research if it was legal to record conversations in my own house. He confirmed that it was, that anything recorded on my own property was admissible as evidence. In the third call, I told him about my plan. "It's risky," Franklin warned me. "But if you're determined, I support you. Just promise me you won't do anything without consulting me first." "I promise," I lied, because I already had the next step planned. On Friday night, Matthew finally knocked on my door. "Mum, can we talk?" "Come in, son." He entered slowly, his hands in his pockets. He sat on the edge of my bed, in the same spot where he sat as a child when he had nightmares. "About the letter, you read it?" "Victoria showed it to me. I didn't know you felt that way." That phrase almost made me laugh. Or cry. I didn't know if it was honesty or willful blindness. "Matthew, look at me." He looked up. His eyes were Robert's, the same brown eyes with golden flecks that made me fall in love 40 years ago. "Did you really not know? Or did you not want to know?" He remained silent. And in that silence, I found my answer. "The $180,000, he began. "I don't want to talk about that now. But, Mum, I will pay you back. I swear, it's just that—" "Matthew," my voice came out firm, "I didn't come into this world to be paid back. I came to be respected. And in my own house, I don't feel respected. Do you understand the difference?" He nodded slowly. His eyes were glassy. "I'm sorry." "I know, but I'm sorry isn't enough. I need to see changes, real changes." "What do you want me to do?" And there it was, the question I had been waiting for. "I want you to let me live in peace in my house. I want your wife to treat me with basic respect, and I want you to start contributing fairly to the expenses or find your own place." He stood up abruptly. "Are you kicking us out?" "No. I'm giving you options. $500 monthly in rent. It's cheap for this house. Or you can save up and look for your own place, like you always said you were going to do." "But, Mum, we don't have that money right now." "You have money for a luxury car, for expensive clothes, for hair salons and restaurants." My voice didn't tremble. "You have money. You just don't want to use it on me." He stood there in the middle of the room, divided between 2 loyalties. And once again, he chose silence. "Think about it," I said softly. "You have 1 month." He left my room without saying anything more. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake looking at the ceiling, wondering if I had been too hard, if I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But when morning came, and I saw the sun coming through my window, illuminating Robert's photo on the nightstand, I knew I had done the right thing. because love without respect is not love. It's a habit, and I had been a habit for too long. It was time to be a decision. What happened next surprised even me, because it turned out I wasn't the only one with secrets in this house. When I opened that chest in front of them, their eyes filled with greed. They didn't know it was a trap. The 1-month deadline I gave Matthew passed like sand through my fingers. 30 days where the tension in the house was so thick you could almost chew it. Victoria continued to avoid me, but I noticed something different in her gaze when she thought I wasn't looking. She was calculating, planning, waiting. I was too. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those hot May afternoons where the air doesn't move and everything seems to stop. I was in my room, reorganizing my summer closet. I took out old boxes, dresses I no longer wore, shoes saved from Robert's time. And then accidentally I left my bedroom door ajar. Just as Victoria was walking down the hallway, I heard her footsteps stop. Then, that held breath of someone who is seeing something they shouldn't be seeing but can't look away. In my hands, I held the burgundy velvet chest. It was beautiful, I have to admit. It was about 16 inches long and 10 inches wide. The velvet was worn at the corners, but it retained that dark red, almost blood colour, that gave it an air of antiquity and mystery. It had golden engravings on the lid, intertwined initials that were barely distinguishable anymore. It had belonged to my maternal grandmother. It passed to my mother, and then to me. Inside, I kept the family jewels. There weren't many. We weren't rich. But every piece had a story. It had weight. It had sentimental and economic value. I opened the chest slowly, like someone uncovering a treasure, knowing perfectly well that Victoria was watching me from the hallway. I took out the pearl necklace. 36 natural, irregular pearls, with that creamy luster that only real pearls give. Robert had given it to me on our 20th anniversary. He had saved for 2 years to buy it. Then, the gold earrings with emeralds. Small, discreet, but genuine. An inheritance from my grandmother, who received them from her own mother during the Great Depression. The Art Deco brooch, made of silver and onyx. A piece from the 1930s that my mother wore on special occasions and was worth, according to the last appraisal I had 10 years ago, around $2,500. And finally, the ring. The engagement ring Robert gave me under a jacaranda tree in Central Park. White gold with a small but brilliant diamond, surrounded by tiny sapphires. I put them on my bed, one by one, admiring them under the light coming through the window. And then, as if I had just noticed her presence, I turned towards the door. "Oh, Victoria, I didn't see you there." She took a step forward, her eyes fixed on the jewels. She wasn't even pretending to be discreet anymore. "Is that real?" I smiled, that proud grandmother smile showing her treasures. "Yes, dear. They are family heirlooms. They've been with us for generations." I took the pearl necklace and let it run through my fingers. This necklace is almost 50 years old. The pearls are natural, see? Not like the ones nowadays that are all cultured and uniform. Victoria moved closer, mesmerized. "Can I—" She held out her hand. I gave her the necklace. She took it with exaggerated care, like someone holding something invaluable, which it truly was. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Her eyes shone in a way that reminded me of a child in front of a candy store display. "It must be worth a lot." "Well, I've never sold it. But yes, I suppose so." The old appraisal said that, altogether, there was about $20,000 worth. But that was 10 years ago. Who knows now? I saw her swallow, how her fingers caressed the pearls with reverence mixed with avarice. "And this will someday belong to To Matthew, I completed the sentence. Well, to you both. For when I'm gone, of course. They are for the family. Something changed in her expression. A light came on in her eyes. A dangerous light that I knew very well because I had seen it in parents when they discovered that a teacher had something they wanted. "Where do you keep something so valuable?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Right here, in my closet. I've always kept it here. Although lately I've been thinking that maybe I should put it in a safety deposit box. You know, just in case." "Yes, it would be safer," she said quickly. "I can help you take it to the bank if you want." I'd bet anything she did. "Oh dear, how kind. Yes, maybe one of these days we'll do it together." I gently took the necklace from her and put everything back in the chest. I closed it with the small key that hung from a little chain. Victoria followed every movement with her eyes. "Well, I'll let you rest," she finally said, but her feet didn't move. She kept looking at the chest as if she wanted to imprint it on her memory. When she finally left, I waited 5 minutes. Then I casually walked out of my room and past the living room. Victoria was on the sofa with her cell phone, but she wasn't watching videos or social media. She was on Google. I read the searches on her screen from the reflection in the hallway mirror. Natural pearl necklace price. Antique jewelry value US. Family heirloom jewelry, who inherits? I smiled to myself and kept walking. For the next few days, Victoria completely changed. She was suddenly kind, soliciting. She asked if I needed help with groceries. She offered to make me tea. She even tried to cook something special for me, even though it tasted horrible. "Eleanor," she said to me one Wednesday afternoon, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Have you thought about the bank thing? I have time tomorrow. We can go together to open the safety deposit box." "Oh, yes, but I don't know. I'm afraid they'll ask for a lot of paperwork." "Don't worry. I'll help you with everything. I can even put my name on the box too. So if something happens to you, we'll have access. You know, for Matthew's sake." There was the real motive. "What a great idea," I said, feigning innocence. "Let me think about it." But I didn't think about it. Instead, I called Franklin. "She took the bait," I told him on the phone that night, locked in my bathroom with the water running so they wouldn't hear me. "Are you sure about this, teacher? It's a risk." "I know, but I need her to show her true intentions. And this is perfect. Do you want me to prepare the documents?" "Yes, but with the clause we discussed." The next day, I told Victoria that I had made an appointment at the bank for Friday. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Perfect. I'll go with you. Don't worry about a thing." Friday arrived. We went to the bank. We opened a safety deposit box. We put the jewelry chest inside. And we signed the papers. What Victoria didn't know, because she didn't read the fine print that the executive explained quickly and she signed without paying attention, was that the box required 2 keys to open. One I had. The other was held by Franklin Foster, with very specific legal instructions. It could only be opened if I died of natural causes, certified by doctors, and after a full notarial review of my last wishes. If something happened to me, suspiciously, the box would automatically be frozen, and its contents would go into a legal investigation. Victoria technically had access to the box. Her name was on the papers, but she couldn't open it without me. And if I died, she couldn't open it either without going through a legal process that would expose any irregularity. It was the perfect trap. We left the bank. Victoria was happy, believing she had won something, that she had secured her future. She didn't know that she had just signed her own sentence, because I wasn't just protecting myself from her. I was protecting myself from any convenient accident that might befall me. And above all, I was creating evidence of her true character. Evidence that I would soon need. What happened next was so fast that even I wasn't prepared. Because Victoria made a mistake that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning when everything exploded, and I made sure there were witnesses. The calm after the bank visit lasted exactly 12 days. 12 days where Victoria acted like the perfect daughter-in-law. She asked about my health. She offered to take me to the doctor. She even gave me a wool shawl so you don't get cold at night. I accepted everything with smiles and thanks. But inside, I was preparing, because I knew this was the eye of the hurricane. That deceptive stillness before everything unleashes with fury. And I was right. On Thursday night, while feigning sleep, I heard voices in Matthew and Victoria's room. They were arguing, low but loud enough for me to catch isolated words. It can't go on like this. The house should be ours. She's old. How much longer? The notary said we can. My heart raced. I silently got out of bed, barefoot, and placed my cell phone in record mode against the wall we shared. The app Franklin had recommended amplified the sound. What I heard chilled my blood. My cousin works at a nursing home, Victoria was saying. He says that with a doctor's certificate that she can no longer care for herself, we can admit her, and then the house would be free. I don't know, Victoria. She's my mum. So what? She's been in the way for years. Look at us, Matthew. We can't have children because we live with your mother. We can't start our lives. This house should be ours since your dad died. But legally, there are ways. My uncle is a lawyer. He says that with a power of attorney and a diagnosis of senile dementia, we can take control of her assets. And you've seen how she's been lately. She forgets things. She confuses days. Even the doctor could certify that she's not well. I felt nauseous, not because of what they were planning, but because of how well my acting had worked. Too well. I don't know if I can do that. The mother is careful, but not scandalized, not outraged, as a son defending his mother should be. Oh, Matthew, don't be a coward. It's for our own good, for our future. Besides, she'll be cared for at the nursing home. It's better for everyone. The silence that followed was worse than any word, because it meant Matthew was considering it. My own son was considering locking me up to take my house. I saved the recording. I sent it to the cloud, to 3 different emails, and then I knew the moment had come. I couldn't wait any longer. On Friday morning, I called my 2 daughters. Chloe, Brittany, I need you to come to the house tomorrow. Both of you, at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's urgent. Are you okay, Mum? Chloe asked, alarmed. Yes, but I need you to be here and bring your husbands. It's important. Then I called Franklin. It's time. Are you sure? Completely. Prepare everything we discussed. The complete documentation. All of it. And I need you to come tomorrow at 10, with the notary if possible. Understood, teacher. Finally, I called my friend Rose. I need you to be here tomorrow as a witness and bring your fully charged cell phone. What are you going to do, Eleanor? I'm going to take my life back. Saturday dawned clear. One of those days where the sky is so blue it hurts to look at it. I got up early. I put on my best blouse, the blue one with white flowers that Robert gave me for our last anniversary. I put on my pearl earrings. I carefully styled my hair. If this was going to be a battle, I would enter like a queen. At 9:30, they started to arrive. First Chloe with her husband, Robert, my eldest daughter, with that worried look she hadn't lost since she was a child. Mum, what's going on? Wait until everyone is here, dear. Then Brittany with her husband, Jack, and my 2 grandchildren, Sebastian and Lucy. The children ran to hug me. Grandma, we haven't seen you in forever. I know, my loves, I know. Rose arrived promptly with a bag of donuts that she left on the dining room table. And finally, Franklin Foster with his leather briefcase and an older gentleman in a suit who he introduced as Notary Miller. Matthew and Victoria were in the kitchen having breakfast. When they saw so many people enter, their faces transformed. "What is this?" Victoria asked, standing up. "It's a family meeting," I said in a calm voice. "Sit down, everyone. I have important things to say." We settled into the living room. I in the main armchair, the one that had been Robert's, my daughters on the sides, Franklin and the notary standing next to me, the others scattered in chairs brought from the dining room. Victoria and Matthew remained standing, tense, like cornered animals. "You can sit down," I repeated. It wasn't a suggestion. They slowly sat on the grey sofa they had bought. I took a deep breath and began. "I have gathered you here because I need everyone to hear this, and I need witnesses to what I am about to say." I took out my cell phone. I connected it to the Bluetooth speaker and played the recording from Thursday night. Victoria's voice filled the room. "My cousin works at a nursing home. He says that with a doctor's certificate that she can no longer care for herself, we can admit her." I saw the colour drain from Matthew's face. How Victoria opened her mouth without any sound coming out. Chloe put her hand over her mouth. Brittany started to cry. I let the recording continue until the end. Until that part where Matthew didn't say no, where he only kept silent in complicity. When it finished, the silence in the room was absolute. "Mum," Matthew tried to speak. I raised my hand. "I haven't finished. This is not all." I took out the yellow folder I had stored at Rose's house. I opened it on the coffee table. "Here are all the receipts for this house for the last 3 years. Electricity, water, gas, property tax, maintenance, everything paid by me, with my $1,100 monthly retirement." I put another document on top. "Here is the bank statement that proves that the $180,000 I lent for a down payment on a house was used to buy a luxury car. A car I have never used, that they haven't even offered me to use." Another document. "And here are the screenshots of the messages between Victoria and her sister, where she literally says, 'A few more months of putting up with the old lady, and this house will be ours.'" Victoria suddenly stood up. "You spied on my phone. That's illegal." Franklin spoke for the first time, his voice professional and cold. "Actually, Mum, everything in this folder was legally obtained. The recordings were made on Mrs. Eleanor's private property, where she has every right to record. The documents are copies of originals, and the messages were photographed from a laptop that your husband left open in a common area of the house." Victoria turned towards Matthew. "Say something, don't just sit there." But Matthew didn't say anything. He stared at the floor, his eyes glassy. I continued because I still wasn't finished. "I want you to know," I said, looking directly at Matthew, "that this house will never be yours while I live. I have already modified my will. If something happens to me, the house is divided only between Chloe and Brittany. Matthew can only inherit if he first pays me back the $180,000 he owes me. If he doesn't pay it back before my death, his share is voided." Notary Miller took out a document. "Here is the updated will, signed and certified 3 days ago. It is completely legal and final." Matthew finally looked up. There were tears in his eyes. "Mum, I never wanted to." "Never wanted what, Matthew? Never wanted to keep quiet while your wife planned to lock me up? Never wanted to lie to me about the money? Never wanted to make me feel invisible in my own house?" My voice broke, but I remained firm. "I am going to give you one option. Only one. You have 30 days to leave this house. I can lend you $5,000 for a month's rent on an apartment. It is more than you deserve, but I am your mother, and I will not leave you on the street." "This is ridiculous," Victoria shouted. "You can't just kick us out like this." Franklin intervened again. "Yes, she can, Ma'am. This is her house. You do not have a rental agreement. You do not pay rent. Legally, you are guests who have overstayed their welcome. If you do not leave voluntarily in 30 days, we will proceed with a legal eviction. And with this evidence, believe me, we will win quickly." Victoria opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. But no coherent sound came out. Matthew, my son, the boy who once promised me he would build me a huge house, burst into tears. "Mum, forgive me, please." And there, seeing my son cry, I felt something inside me break too. But there was no turning back. What they didn't understand was simple. Love is not begged for. It is earned, and it is lost. And they had lost it a long time ago. Now I was just recovering what was always mine, my dignity. What happened in those 30 days was something I will never forget, for better or for worse. I gave them one last chance, to leave with dignity or to leave with shame. They chose, but it was too late for pride. The 30 days that followed that meeting were the strangest of my life. The house became a divided space, as if an invisible line separated enemy territories. They in their room, I in mine, and in the middle, a silence so heavy it hurt to breathe it. Victoria never spoke to me again, not once. When we coincided in the kitchen, she took what she needed and left like the devil was after her. Her eyes shot daggers of hatred at me every time she saw me. She no longer feigned kindness. There were no more masks. And in a twisted way, that gave me peace. Because finally we were being honest. But Matthew was different. My son became a ghost who wandered the house with slumped shoulders and a lost look. He lost weight. He stopped taking care of himself. Sometimes I found him sitting in the garden, staring at Robert's plants without really seeing anything. One afternoon, 11 days after the meeting, he knocked on my door. "Mum, can I come in?" I was embroidering a tablecloth, that activity that always calmed my nerves. I put down the needle. "Come in." He entered slowly, as if afraid of breaking something. He stood in the middle of the room, his hands in his pockets. "I want you to know that we already found an apartment, in the suburbs. It has 2 bedrooms. It's fine." "I'm glad." He nodded, but he didn't leave. There was something else he wanted to say and didn't know how. "Mum, I never wanted things to come to this." I put the embroidery on my lap. I looked him directly in the eyes, those eyes of Robert's that once looked at me with childish adoration. But they didn't they? "Yes," his voice broke. "And it's my fault. Not Victoria's. Mine. Because I failed you. I let everything happen. I kept quiet when I should have defended you." I felt something in my chest loosen, just a little. "Why, Matthew? Why did you do this to me?" He sat on the floor, right there, like when he was a child and came to confess that he had broken something or gotten a bad grade. Tears rolled down his cheeks uncontrollably. "Because I was scared of losing her. Victoria has always been intense, demanding, and I thought that if I didn't do what she wanted, she would leave me, like the others." He wiped his face with his sleeve. "I know it sounds pathetic. I know it's not an excuse, but it's the truth." "And me? Weren't you afraid of losing me? I thought you would always be there." that mothers always forgive, that I could do whatever, and you would still love me. The brutal honesty of that confession hit me like a stone, because he was right. I had allowed it. I had allowed him to believe that my love was unconditional to the point of self-destruction, that he could hurt me without consequences. A mother's love is great, Matthew, but it is not infinite. It has limits, and you crossed all of mine. He sobbed, hard, like a child who finally understands that actions have real consequences. Will you ever be able to forgive me? That question floated in the air between us. The truth is, I didn't know the answer. Not yet. I don't know, son. But I know this. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. And even if I forgive you someday, things will never be the same. Because I changed. And you will also have to change if you want to recover something of what you lost. He stayed sitting there, on my bedroom floor, crying like I hadn't seen him cry since he was 8 years old and fell off his bicycle. And I let him cry, because those tears were necessary. They were part of his learning. The following days were filled with boxes and moving. Matthew and Victoria packed their things with mechanical movements. I stayed in my room most of the time, letting the process happen without my presence. Chloe and Brittany came to help me organize the house afterward. We removed the grey furniture. We took the old furniture, the ones with history, out of storage. We put the terracotta curtains back up. We hung the California landscape paintings. "Are you okay, Mum?" Brittany asked me, while we hung the family photos Victoria had taken down. "I'm sad," I admitted, "but I'm also at peace. For the first time in years, I'm at peace." On the 29th day, one day before the deadline, a moving truck arrived. Matthew and 2 movers took everything out. Clothes, furniture, boxes, that grey sofa I hated so much. Victoria supervised everything with a look of contained fury. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look at me. She got into the car bought with my money, and drove off without looking back. Matthew was the last to leave. Carrying a box of photographs, he stopped at the door. "Thank you for the $5,000. I will pay it back, along with the other $180,000. I don't know when, but I will do it." "Don't do it for me, Matthew. Do it for yourself, so you learn that debts are paid, that promises are kept." He nodded, and then in a small voice he asked, "Can I come visit you? Someday, when things are calmer." I really thought about it. "Call me in 6 months. If by then you have kept your word, if you have shown that you've changed, we can try to rebuild something. But it will be different, with limits, with respect." "I understand." He reached out as if to hug me. I tensed up. I wasn't ready. He noticed. He stopped. And he just kissed me on the forehead. "I love you, Mum. And I'm sorry. I really am." And he left. I closed the door behind him. I leaned against the wood. And finally, after months of holding back, of being strong, of being strategic, I allowed myself to cry. I didn't cry for Matthew, or for Victoria, or even for the lost money. I cried for the broken illusion of what could have been and never was, for that son I raised to be good and somehow got lost along the way, for the years I wouldn't recover. But I also cried with relief, because finally, my house was mine again. The following months were for healing. I started inviting my friends over again on Thursdays. Rose, Amy, Sarah. We drank coffee and ate donuts at my table, without having to ask permission, without feeling like we were in the way. Chloe and Brittany started coming on Sundays with the grandchildren. The house filled up again with children's laughter, the smell of chicken and mashed potatoes, those long talks that only happen in families who truly love each other. I adopted a cat, a stray orange cat that appeared one afternoon in my garden. I named him Robert because he had those same golden eyes as my husband and that tranquil way of observing the world. And little by little, I started remembering who I was before I became the invisible woman in my own life. 6 months later, Matthew called. "Mum, I already paid the 5,000. I deposited it today, and I have 300 saved up for the rest. I know there's a long way to go, but I'm working on it." "How are you, son?" There was a pause. "I'm better. Victoria and I are in therapy. She's still angry with you, but at least she's working on understanding why she did what she did. And me too. I'm learning to set boundaries, to not be so afraid." "I'm glad. Can I come visit you? Coffee? Half an hour?" I thought about it, and this time the answer was easier. "Yes, but just you, and at a coffee shop, not here. I'm not ready for you to enter this house yet." "I understand. I love you, Mum." "I love you too, son. But loving doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering and choosing every day to rebuild what was broken." 1 year after that family meeting that changed everything, I am sitting in my garden. The afternoon sun warms my face. Robert the cat sleeps in my lap. My plants are blooming because I finally have time to take care of them. Not everything is perfect. I still have difficult days, days where I miss the idea of what could have been, days where I wonder if I was too hard. But then I remember the padlock, the humiliations, the nights where I felt like a foreigner in my own bed. And I know I did the right thing, because I recovered something more valuable than a house. I recovered my dignity, my peace, my right to live without fear, without guilt, without having to justify my existence. Matthew comes to visit me once a month. We have coffee, we talk. We've had 4 visits now, and each one is a little less awkward than the last. I don't know if we will ever have the relationship we had. Probably not. But we are building something new, something based on mutual respect, on clear boundaries, on love that is no longer blind but conscious. And that is enough. Because I learned something I should have learned a long time ago. True wealth is not in what you own, but in what you don't allow to be taken from you. Your peace, your dignity, your right to live without apologizing for existing. And that no one will ever take from me again. I share this story not for you to judge me, nor for you to applaud me. I share it because I know there are many women out there living the same thing, feeling invisible in their own homes, putting up with it because they think it's what they have to do. And I want you to know this. You don't have to put up with it. You don't have to be martyrs. You can set boundaries. You can say no. You can take back your lives. It is never too late to defend yourself. It is never too late to choose yourself. I did it at 67 years old. And if I could do it, you can too. Don't let anyone make you feel less. Not your son, not your daughter-in-law, not anyone. You are enough. You always have been. And you deserve respect. Especially in your own house. Especially in your own life. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think, if it gave you the strength to do what you need to do, leave me a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me if you are fighting your own battle too. You are not alone. None of us are. Like this video, if this story reminded you of your own worth. Subscribe to keep hearing stories of women who decided to stop being invisible. Because our voices matter, our stories matter. And as long as there is someone willing to tell them, there will be hope for all the others. With love and respect, Eleanor. The end. My son and my daughter-in-law brought me to a 5-star hotel for the first time. We stayed there all weekend. But then he said, "Thanks for the stay, Mum." and ran off, leaving me without any money to pay the bill. Suddenly, the elderly receptionist came out from behind the counter and asked, "Are you Mr. Harrison's daughter? I worked for your father for 33 years. Before he died, he told me, 'Give this envelope to my daughter when you see her.' When I opened the envelope, I was speechless because my son had planned this whole thing from the beginning, and what I discovered inside changed my life forever. Let me tell you how I arrived at that nightmare moment. 2 weeks ago, Michael called me with a voice I hadn't heard since he was a kid. Excited, warm, like he actually cared. 'Mum, I want to take you somewhere special. Danielle and I want to thank you for everything you've done for us.' My hands trembled, holding the phone. 66 years of life, working silently, raising that man with my own broken hands. And never had I heard words like that come out of his mouth. I booked an amazing hotel, 5 stars. 'Mum, you are going to have your own suite, spa, gourmet restaurant, all inclusive. It's your gift. You deserve it.' I closed my eyes and the tears just rolled down. I thought that finally, after so many years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights cleaning other people's houses, of shattered knees scrubbing floors to pay for his college, my son saw me. He valued me. He loved me. How stupid I was. Friday morning, Michael and Danielle picked me up in a shiny black sedan. She wore a champagne-coloured dress that probably cost more than my rent for 3 months. He had on expensive sunglasses and that perfect smile he always wore when he wanted something. But I didn't know that then. I only saw my son, successful, elegant, finally proud of his mother. The hotel was a palace. Towering marble columns, floors so shiny you could see your reflection, crystal chandeliers that seemed to rain down golden light. The smell of jasmine and expensive wood floated in the air. I had never stepped foot in a place like that. I felt small, out of place, in my old brown dress and my worn-out shoes. But Michael took my arm and whispered, "Relax, Mom. You are just as important here as anyone." Danielle was smiling next to me, perfect, made up like a magazine model. "Sandra, you are going to love the suite. It has a garden view, a jacuzzi tub, everything." Her voice was sweet like poisoned honey, but I didn't know it. I only felt gratitude, happiness, that warm feeling in my chest, thinking that maybe, just maybe, my life was finally getting better. The suite was bigger than my entire apartment, a huge bed with white sheets that looked like clouds, giant windows that overlooked a garden full of red and yellow flowers, a cream-coloured sofa where 3 people could sleep, and the bathroom. My God. The bathroom had pearl-coloured tiles, mirrors with golden lights, towels so soft they made me want to cry. I sat on the bed and touched the sheets with trembling hands. This was real. My son had brought me here. He loved me. The weekend was a dream. Breakfasts with exotic fruits I'd never tasted, lunches in the restaurant where the waiters treated you like a queen. Michael ordered wine. Danielle laughed that crystalline laugh, and I felt part of something beautiful. For the first time in decades, I didn't think about debt, bills, or the pain in my back. Only that moment of false peace existed. Saturday night, we had dinner on the hotel terrace. The lights of Los Angeles shone in the distance like fallen stars. Michael raised his glass and said, "To you, Mum, for everything you sacrificed for me." Danielle applauded. I cried. We toasted. And as the sweet wine went down my throat, I didn't know I was swallowing my own destruction. Sunday morning, Michael told me to come down to the lobby at 11. "We'll check out together. Don't worry, Mum." I went down right on time, with my small suitcase and my heart full. He and Danielle were already there, talking to the blonde receptionist. I walked over, smiling. Michael saw me, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thanks for the stay, Mum. It was an unforgettable weekend." Then he put the bill in my hands, $11,000, and he left. They walked away slowly, as if they were strolling in a park. Michael with his hands in his pockets, Danielle with her designer purse hanging from her shoulder, both laughing softly, whispering things to each other. I watched them pass through the hotel's glass doors, get into that shiny black sedan, and disappear into the morning traffic of Los Angeles. Just like that. As if nothing happened. As if I weren't his mother. As if the last 3 days hadn't existed. My legs stopped responding. The paper with the bill was shaking so much in my hands that the numbers became blurry. $11,000. 11,000. I made $800 a month cleaning houses. $11,000 was more than a year of my life working until my back broke. And my son knew it. He knew exactly how much I earned, how much I had, how much I didn't have. He knew I couldn't pay that. Never could. The blonde receptionist cleared her throat softly from the counter. "Ma'am, will you be paying in cash or with a card?" Her voice was kind, professional, but there was something in her eyes. Pity. She was watching my humiliation in real time and trying to be polite about it. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Only a choked gasp, as if someone had kicked me in the stomach. Around me, the lobby was still alive. A young couple laughed next to the marble fountain. A man in a suit talked on the phone in English, gesturing with his free hand. A family with small children dragged suitcases toward the elevator. Everyone living their normal lives while mine was falling apart in pieces right in front of them. I felt heat on my cheeks, pure humiliation running through me like liquid fire. I don't have it." The words came out broken, barely a whisper. The receptionist tilted her head, waiting. Her pink nails tapped softly on the keyboard. "Ma'am, if there's a problem, I can call the manager." Problem, that small word to describe the abyss I had just fallen into. My son had abandoned me in a luxury hotel with no way to pay. He had used me. He had brought me here knowing exactly what he was going to do, planning it, enjoying it. The tears began to fall without permission, thick, hot, loaded with rage and shame. The guests started to look at me, some with curiosity, others quickly looking away, embarrassed to witness something so intimate and painful. The receptionist grew nervous. "Ma'am, please, calm down. Please, calm. We'll figure this out." But her voice sounded hollow. There was no solution. I didn't have $11,000. I didn't even have 1,000. I barely had enough for the bus ride home. Suddenly I heard slow steps, dragging across the marble. Steps of someone older. I looked up with soaked eyes and saw an elderly woman coming out from behind the counter. She must have been over 80 years old. Completely white hair pulled back in a bun, deep wrinkles that told decades of stories, and honey-colored eyes that looked at me with a strange intensity. She wore the hotel uniform, but hers was different. Older, as if she had been wearing the same fabric for 30 years. She approached me with short but firm steps. The blonde receptionist looked at her, surprised. "Emma, you don't have to—" But the elderly woman raised a wrinkled hand, silencing her. "Emma?" That name didn't mean anything to me then. The elderly woman stopped in front of me, so close I could smell her soft perfume of lavender and thyme. She studied my face as if she were looking for something specific. Her eyes scanned my features with a mixture of astonishment and sadness. "You are Mr. Harrison's daughter." Her voice was raspy but firm. The question hit me like a punch to the chest. Harrison, my father. No one had said that name in front of me for more than 30 years. He had died when I was 35, leaving me alone with a small child and no inheritance. Only blurry memories of a serious man who worked too much and spoke little. Yes, yes, I am his daughter. My voice came out broken, confused. How did this woman know who my father was? Emma closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were holding back a huge emotion. Then she opened them, and a solitary tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. I worked for your father for 33 years, from the time I was 20 until the day he died. The lobby seemed to freeze. The sounds became distant. Only she and I existed in that suspended moment. Your father was a great man, difficult, demanding, but great. I was the housekeeper in his house. I cleaned, cooked, took care of his things. Her voice trembled with every word, loaded with a weight I didn't understand. Before he died, he called me to his bed. He was very sick. He could barely speak. He took my hand and told me something I never forgot. Emma reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a yellowed envelope, folded, battered by the years. The corners were worn, the ink on the front almost erased. But there, in shaky handwriting, was my name, Sandra. He told me, Emma, someday my daughter is going to come here. She is going to be alone. She is going to be lost. When you see her, give her this. It is the only thing I can give her now. She held the envelope out to me with trembling hands. I looked at it without daring to touch it. He knew I would work here. He arranged for me to be hired at this hotel 30 years ago. He told me to wait, that someday you would arrive. And here you are. Her voice broke completely. After 33 years, I can finally fulfill my promise. I took the envelope with numb fingers. It was heavy. Something solid was inside. Something more than paper. I opened it slowly, feeling every second stretch like hot rubber. Inside was a folded letter and an old, rusted metal key. The key had a number engraved on it, 447, and hanging from it was a small leather tag with a handwritten address. I unfolded the letter. My father's handwriting. That slanted writing I remembered from the few times he signed documents at home. The words hit me like stones. Sandra, if you are reading this, it is because you finally discovered that nothing in our family was what it seemed. Forgive me for the secrets. Forgive me for leaving you without explanation. This key opens a storage unit at the address Emma will give you. Inside, you will find the truth about who I really was, and about who you are. Go alone. Trust only yourself. Your father, Robert Harrison. I read the letter 3 times in a row, but the words still made no sense. Secrets. Truth. Who I really was. Every sentence was an enigma wrapped in fog. My father had been a quiet, hard-working man who left early and came home late. He never talked about his job. He never shared anything personal. When he died, I expected some small inheritance, something to help me raise Michael. But there was nothing. Only debts that I had to pay by selling the few pieces of furniture that were left. And now, 30 years later, a rusted key and a letter telling me that everything had been a lie. I looked up at Emma. She was watching me with those honey-coloured eyes full of something that seemed like pity, barely mixed with urgency. What is in that storage unit? My voice sounded louder than I expected, cutting the thick silence that surrounded us. Emma shook her head slowly. I don't know. Your father never told me. He only asked me to give this to you when I saw you lost and alone. And here you are. I looked again at the leather tag hanging from the key. The address was written in almost faded black ink. Industrial Street 447, Warehouse 12, East Side. I knew that area. It was an abandoned part of the city, full of old warehouses and broken streets where no one went after sundown. A dark, forgotten place, perfect for hiding secrets you didn't want anyone to find. Ma'am. The voice of the blonde receptionist abruptly brought me back to reality. And the hotel bill. She was still standing there, holding that paper with $11,000 that I couldn't pay. The humiliation hit me again, but now there was something more. Rage. A cold, sharp rage that grew in my chest like cutting ice. My son had done this to me. He had brought me here knowing exactly what was going to happen, planning it. Emma turned to the receptionist with an authority I didn't expect from someone so old. I will take care of the lady's bill. Put it in my name. I will pay it in installments from my salary. The receptionist opened her mouth to protest, but Emma silenced her with a look. Your father saved my life more times than I can count. This is the least I can do for his daughter. I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck in my throat. This woman, this stranger who had kept a secret for 3 decades, was paying my debt. A debt my own son had created to destroy me. I can't accept this. Emma took my hands in hers, wrinkled and cold. Yes, you can, and you are going to. But first, you are going to go to that address. You are going to open that storage unit, and you are going to find out why your son did what he did. Her words chilled my blood. What do you mean? Emma squeezed my hands with surprising strength. Your father told me things before he died. Things about your family, about secrets he kept buried his whole life. And he told me that someday, someone would come looking for that truth. Someone of your blood. But he didn't expect it to be you who needed it. He expected it to be another. A shiver ran down my spine. Who else knew about this? Emma let go of my hands and took a step back, as if saying the next thing cost her physical effort. Your son was here 6 months ago. He asked for me. He said he was researching his grandfather's life for a family project. I told him I had worked for Mr. Harrison, that I knew him well. He asked me many questions, too many, about properties, about money, about inheritances. The world tilted under my feet. Michael had been here. He had talked to Emma. He had investigated my father. 6 months ago. 6 months of planning this. Planning to bring me here, humiliate me, leave me with nothing. But why? What had he discovered that I didn't know? What did you tell him? My voice was barely a trembling whisper. Emma lowered her gaze, ashamed. I told him your father had properties, that he had left things unresolved. I didn't give him details, but it was enough. I saw how his eyes lit up. Pure greed. And I knew I had made a mistake. I felt nauseous. My son had come here, had manipulated this elderly woman to get information, and then had designed this whole thing. The trip to the hotel, the luxuries, the fake smiles, all to leave me in ruins while he looked for what my father had hidden. I need to go to that storage unit. The words came out firm, loaded with a determination I didn't know I had. Emma nodded slowly. Go now, before he gets there first. Because if Michael finds out where it is, he won't leave you anything. I left the hotel like a sleepwalker, the key clenched in my fist until the metal cut my skin. The midday sun hit my face, blinding me for a moment. The city kept moving, indifferent to my pain. Cars sped past. People walked hurriedly. Street vendors shouted their products. And I stood there, holding onto a rusted key and a truth I still didn't understand. I took a bus toward the east side. The trip lasted almost an hour. I sat next to the window, watching how the city changed from clean, modern buildings to old constructions with graffiti and broken windows. The streets became narrower, dirtier, more dangerous. When I reached my stop, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and dark violet. Industrial Street 447 was exactly as I remembered it from decades ago. An endless row of rusted metal warehouses with corroded doors and huge padlocks. Some had broken windows. Others were completely sealed. Weeds grew between the cracks in the pavement. Trash accumulated in the corners. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of dogs barking. I walked slowly, counting the numbers on the doors. Warehouse 8, Warehouse 9, Warehouse 10. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, I arrived. Warehouse 12. A dark grey metal door, taller than me, with a huge padlock that seemed not to have been touched in decades. Thick cobwebs hung from the corners. Dust covered every inch. I took the key out of my pocket. My hands were trembling so much that it took me 3 tries to get it into the lock. When it finally went in, the metal screeched with a sharp sound that gave me goosebumps. I turned the key slowly. The padlock opened with a dry click that echoed in the silence. I took off the padlock and let it fall to the ground. Then, with both hands, I pushed the door. It opened slowly, grinding as if it were screaming in pain. A blast of cold, damp air came out from inside, bringing with it the smell of mildew, rusted metal, and something else. Something old. Something that had been waiting to be discovered for 30 years. I looked inside. Total darkness. Only shadows dancing in the gloom. I reached for my cell phone, turned on the flashlight, and took the first step toward the truth my father had buried. And what I saw inside made me realize that my life would never be the same. My cell phone light cut through the darkness in a trembling beam that barely illuminated 6 feet ahead. The inside of the warehouse smelled of abandonment, of years of accumulated silence between cold metal walls. My footsteps echoed against the cracked concrete floor, each echo multiplying until it became ghostly whispers. I advanced slowly, sweeping the light across every corner, every shadow that seemed to move. The space was larger than I imagined. About 65 feet long, maybe 30 feet wide. The walls were covered with rusted metal shelves, full of cardboard boxes rotted by humidity. Some had collapsed, spilling their contents onto the floor. Yellowed papers, destroyed folders, blurry photographs. In the center of the warehouse was an old wooden table, covered in dust so thick it looked like grey velvet. And on that table, perfectly centered, as if someone had left it there yesterday, was a large, thick manila envelope, intact, dust-free, as if time hadn't touched it. I approached slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. This didn't make sense. Everything else in the warehouse was destroyed by decades of abandonment, but that envelope looked new. Someone had been here. Recently. I reached out my trembling hand and picked it up. It was heavy, full of more than just paper. I opened it carefully and poured its contents onto the table. Documents. Dozens of documents. Property deeds, birth certificates, death certificates, old black and white photographs, and a brown leather notebook with folded corners. I gripped the phone light between my teeth to free my hands and started to look through them. The first deed was for a house in the center of the city. Address, Liberty Avenue 328, registered in the name of Robert Harrison, my father. Date, 1982. I had never seen that address. I never knew my father owned properties beyond the humble house where I grew up. I checked the next document. Another property. And another. And another. 5 houses in total, all in expensive areas of the city, all registered during the 1970s and 1980s. How was this possible? My father worked in a textile factory. He earned enough to support us. But there were never any luxuries, never any vacations, or new cars, or expensive clothes. My mother sewed our skirts from scraps. I wore shoes until the soles fell off. And my father had 5 properties? My hands trembled, holding those papers that rewrote my entire family history. I picked up one of the birth certificates. The name stopped my heart. Ramon Harrison Delgado. Date of birth, April 15th, 1968. Father's name, Robert Harrison. Mother's name, Victoria Delgado. I read the document 3 times, but the words didn't change. My father had another child, a son who was born 6 years before me, a son with another woman, a brother I never knew existed. I searched frantically through the papers. I found another certificate. Gabriela Harrison Torres, born in 1975. Father Robert Harrison, mother Martina Torres. Another daughter, 3 years younger than me. My breathing became ragged, short. My father had another family, maybe 2, maybe more. While I grew up believing we were his only world, he had other children, other women, other parallel lives that never intersected with mine. The photographs confirmed everything. I picked one up and brought it closer to the cell phone light. My father, young, maybe 30 years old, with his arm around a dark-haired woman with a wide smile. She was holding a baby. Behind them, a large house with a garden. In the next photo, my father with another woman, blonde this time, in front of a shiny car. In another, he was alone, standing in front of an office building, wearing a suit and tie. He wasn't a factory worker. He was someone else entirely. I opened the leather notebook with trembling hands. The pages were full of my father's slanted handwriting. They were records, meticulous notes of income and expenses. January of 1978. Rent collection, $3,200. Payment to Victoria, $500. Payment to Ellen, my mother, $400. Savings for new property, $2,300. Page after page, year after year, a cold, calculated record of how he divided his money among his different families. I sank onto the concrete floor, the notebook pressed against my chest. Everything I believed about my father was a lie. He wasn't a humble man who worked hard to support us. He was a businessman who had accumulated properties, renting out houses, exploiting tenants, maintaining multiple families in ignorance. And my mother never knew. She never suspected that the money he gave her was only a fraction of what he really had. But that didn't explain why Michael had done what he did. How had he discovered all this? And why was abandoning me at that hotel part of his plan? I searched through the documents until I found a recent one. A letter dated 7 months ago, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Dear Michael Henderson, in response to your investigation into the estate of Robert Harrison, I confirm that the mentioned properties are still registered in the name of the deceased. However, there is a sealed will deposited in this notary office that cannot be opened until all legitimate heirs are located and notified. The recognized heirs to date are Ramon Harrison Delgado and Gabriela Harrison Torres. Sincerely, Notary Public Number 47. There it was. Michael had investigated his grandfather, had discovered the existence of the properties, the will, the other heirs, and he had decided that this fortune was his. But to claim it, he needed me, the other legitimate daughter, to disappear or be so destroyed that I couldn't fight legally. That's why the hotel. That's why the humiliation. That's why leaving me without money. He wanted to break me emotionally, ruin me financially, so that when the time came to open that will, I wouldn't have the strength or the resources to claim anything. A metallic sound pulled me out of my thoughts. It came from outside. Footsteps. Someone was walking near the warehouse. I jumped to my feet, put the most important documents in my purse, and turned off the cell phone flashlight. The darkness swallowed me whole. The steps were getting closer, slow, heavy, intentional. They stopped right in front of the warehouse door. "I knew you would come here, Mum." Michael's voice cut through the silence like a knife, icy, without a trace of the fake affection he had used over the weekend. I turned on my phone and pointed the light toward the door. He was there, a silhouette outlined against the orange sunset sky. He no longer wore the expensive sunglasses or the perfect smile. His face was hard, his eyes shining with something dark I had never seen in him before. "Emma told you, didn't she?" The stupid old woman couldn't keep her mouth shut. He took a step inside. I backed away instinctively. "I spent 6 months researching your father. 6 months, discovering that the saintly grandfather I never knew was actually a liar who accumulated a fortune while keeping us in poverty. And now that fortune belongs to me." "He had other children, Michael." My voice sounded firmer than I expected. "There is a will, other heirs. It is not just yours." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Those heirs don't know you exist. And if you don't exist legally, you can't claim anything. That's why I needed to destroy you first. Leave you broke, without resources, without dignity, so that when the time comes to open that will, you will be so broken that you can't fight." Danielle appeared behind him, her arms crossed, and that cold expression that I now understood was her true face. "The hotel was my idea," she said with poisonous pride. "An emotional and financial blow at the same time. Elegant, don't you think?" They laughed together, and the sound turned my stomach. My son and his wife had planned this as if it were a game, as if I weren't human, as if my pain were entertainment. "I won't let you keep it." The words came out before I could think them. Michael took another step toward me, and this time his expression became menacing. "You have no choice, Mom. You are already ruined. You are already left with nothing. And when I'm done with you, you won't even have a place to live." But then, from the darkness at the back of the warehouse, a deep, masculine voice cut the air like thunder. "She is not alone." We all froze. The voice had come from the shadows at the back of the warehouse, grave and firm, loaded with authority. I turned the cell phone light toward it, and the figure of a man slowly emerged from the darkness. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe about 60 years old. He had closely cropped grey hair, deep wrinkles around his eyes, and a square jaw that was strangely familiar. He wore simple clothes, denim pants, and a dark green shirt, but there was something about his posture that commanded respect. He stopped about 10 feet from us, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes swept over Michael with contempt, before settling on me with an expression I couldn't decipher. There was pain there, and also recognition. "Who the hell are you?" Michael took a step forward, trying to regain control of the situation, but his voice sounded less sure. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me, studying me as if he were seeing a ghost. "I'm Ray," he finally said, his voice husky. "Ray Harrison, your brother." The world stopped. The words floated in the thick air of the warehouse like dense smoke. Brother. The birth certificate I had seen minutes earlier came to life before my eyes. The son my father had 6 years before me with another woman. The heir Michael mentioned. He was here. He had been waiting in the shadows all this time. It can't be, I whispered, although deep down I knew it was true. Ray took a step toward the light, and I could see him better. He had the same eyes as my father, dark brown, with that penetrating gaze I remembered from when I was a child. The same shape of the nose, the same jawline. It was like seeing my father alive again, but 30 years later. Tears began to blur my vision without permission. Ray took a folded paper from his shirt pocket and held it out to me. 3 months ago, I received a summons from the notary. They told me my father had died 30 years ago and had left a will, that I was one of the heirs. I didn't know anything about this. My mother never spoke to me about Robert Harrison. I never knew my father. I grew up believing he had abandoned me before I was born. I took the paper with trembling hands. It was the same letter I had seen in the documents, the one from the notary office. I started to investigate, Ray continued, his voice loaded with contained emotion. I discovered I had sisters, you, Sandra, and another, Gabriella, who died 10 years ago in an accident. I discovered that our father was a man who maintained parallel lives, that he lied to all of us, that he built a fortune behind our mothers' backs while they worked themselves to death to support us. His voice broke on the last word. I could see the raw pain in his eyes, the same pain I felt. We were children of the same deception, victims of the same man who had given us life but had denied us the truth. When I discovered that this warehouse existed, I came to investigate. I found all the documents, the properties, the accounts, the letters, and I discovered something else. He turned to Michael with a look that could freeze hell. I discovered that your son had been snooping, that he had bribed notary employees to get private information, that he had contacted Emma to get details about the properties, and I understood that he was planning something, so I decided to wait, to watch, to see how far he was capable of going. Ray walked slowly toward Michael, who backed away instinctively. Danielle pressed herself closer to the wall, her previous arrogance evaporating. What I didn't expect was for you to be so cruel, that you would humiliate your own mother in public, that you would leave her broke, without dignity, just to break her emotionally. Ray stopped in front of Michael, much taller, much more imposing. You are worse than our father. He at least had the decency to keep his lies secret. You use them as weapons against the woman who gave you life. Michael tried to regain his defiant posture, but his voice came out trembling. That fortune is mine. I am his grandson. I have more right than you, a bastard who never knew the old man. Ray didn't move, but the tension in his jaw became visible. Legally, we are equal heirs. Sandra, me, and you through your mother. But here is the difference. I didn't come to steal. I came to know the truth, and to make sure no one else suffered for Robert Harrison's secrets. He turned to me, and his expression softened. Sandra, I know this is a lot. I know your world just collapsed. But you need to know something else. He pulled another document from the inside pocket of his shirt. This one was older, yellowed, with official seals. Our father's will was very specific. He divided the properties equally among his legitimate children, but he added a clause. If any of the heirs tries to dispossess another through deceit or violence, they automatically lose their share. The words fell like bombs in the silence of the warehouse. I looked at Michael and saw his face turn pale. Ray continued, implacable. Your son planned to destroy you to take your share. He paid private investigators. He bribed employees. He conspired to leave you in financial and emotional ruins. Everything is documented. I made sure to collect every piece of evidence over the last 3 months. He took out his cell phone and started scrolling through photographs. Emails between Michael and a private investigator. Bank transfers to corrupt notary employees. Text messages between him and Danielle, planning every detail of the weekend at the hotel. Everything was there. Every step of their cruel plan captured in digital evidence that would destroy them legally. According to the clause in the will, Michael loses all rights to the inheritance. And you, Danielle. He looked at my daughter-in-law with absolute coldness. As an accomplice, you won't see a cent either. Danielle let out a choked cry. This is a setup. You can't prove it. Ray smiled without humor. I can, and I will. I have already delivered copies of all this evidence to the notary in charge of the will. The legal hearing is in 2 weeks. By then, you two will not only lose the inheritance, you will face charges for fraud, emotional extortion, and conspiracy. Michael exploded. You are a meddling bastard. This is not your problem. She is my mother, not yours. He took a threatening step toward Ray, but Ray didn't flinch. Exactly. She is your mother, the woman who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who gave you everything she had, and you repaid her with betrayal. That makes you something worse than a thief. It makes you a monster. The silence that followed was so dense it could be physically felt. Michael trembled with impotent rage. Danielle cried against the wall, her mask of perfection completely destroyed. And I stood there, trying to process that in a single afternoon I had lost my son, but I had gained a brother, that my father was a liar, but he had the foresight to protect us from the grave, that everything I thought I knew about my family was false. Ray approached me and put a large, rough hand on my shoulder. I know it hurts. Believe me, I do. I went through the same thing 3 months ago. Discovering your whole life was built on lies is like dying and being reborn at the same time. But there is something you need to understand. His voice became softer, almost tender. Our father was a terrible man, but we don't have to be. We can choose what to do with what he left us. I don't want that fortune. The words came out of my mouth before I could think them. Ray nodded slowly as if he had expected exactly that answer. Me neither. At least not all of it. That's why I have a proposal. But first, we need to finish this. He turned to Michael one last time. You have 2 options. You leave here now. You stay away from your mother forever. And maybe, just maybe, I won't press criminal charges. Or you try to fight this legally, and I will make sure you spend the next few years in a cell. Michael looked at me with pure hatred. There was no trace of the son I once loved. Only a cruel stranger who had used my love as a weapon. This doesn't end here. He spat the words like venom. He grabbed Danielle by the arm, and they both left the warehouse, their steps echoing against the metal until they faded into the distance. And then, for the first time all afternoon, Ray and I were alone. The silence that remained after Michael and Danielle left was different. It wasn't oppressive or menacing. It was strange, loaded with unanswered questions and half-discovered truths. Ray remained standing in front of me, his hands in his pockets, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. As if I were a wounded animal that could attack or flee at any moment. And maybe he was right. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I should cry, scream, or just sink to the floor and give up. How did you know I would be here today? My voice sounded husky, worn out by so many emotions in so few hours. Ray shrugged and leaned against one of the rusted shelves. I didn't know for sure, but I knew your son's plan. I knew he would bring you to the hotel, that he would abandon you, and I assumed Emma would keep her promise. So I've been coming here every afternoon for the last 2 weeks, waiting. Today was the day. 2 weeks. This man, this stranger who shared my blood, had spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned warehouse to protect me from a danger I didn't even know existed. Why? The question came out barely as a whisper. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me. We don't know each other. Ray looked away toward the shadows at the back of the warehouse, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Because I spent 58 years believing I was alone in the world, he finally said, his voice loaded with an old, deep sadness. My mother died when I was 19. I never had siblings. I never had family beyond her. And when I discovered I had sisters, that there were people in the world I shared blood with, I felt something I had never felt before. Hope. The possibility of not being alone. He turned to me, and his eyes shone with contained tears. Gabriella is already gone. Only you and I were left. And I wasn't going to let your son rob you before we could meet. The tears I had been holding back finally poured out. Thick, hot, unstoppable. I cried for my lost son, for my lying father, for my mother who died without knowing the truth. For all the years Ray and I had lived apart, ignorant of each other's existence. I cried until there were no more tears, only dry sobs that shook my entire body. And Ray walked over and hugged me. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to comfort me with empty words. He just held me while I fell apart, his embrace firm and warm, smelling of simple soap and honesty. And in that embrace from a stranger who was my brother, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Security. The feeling that someone was on my side unconditionally, without hidden agendas, without betrayals waiting in the shadows. When I finally calmed down, Ray let go of me and pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. I took it and wiped my face, ashamed that I had broken down like that. "I'm sorry," I murmured. He shook his head. "Don't apologize. You have the right to cry. You have the right to feel everything you are feeling." I cried for weeks when I discovered the truth about our father. He crouched down and picked up the leather notebook that I had dropped on the floor. He opened it to a marked page and showed it to me. "Look at this. Here is the proof of who Robert Harrison really was." I brought the cell phone light closer. It was a journal entry dated 1985. "Victoria threatened today to tell everything if I don't give her more money. I gave her $500 extra to shut her up. Ellen suspects something. I must be more careful. The properties are generating good income. Soon I can buy the 5th house." I read entry after entry, each one colder and more calculating than the last. My father didn't write about love or regret. He wrote about money, control, manipulation, how to keep his women separate, how to ensure none of his children knew each other, how to maximize his profits from the properties while giving us the bare minimum to survive. It was a meticulous record of a double, triple life, maintained with the precision of an accountant and the coldness of a con artist. "He was a monster," I said, and the words burned my throat. Ray closed the notebook slowly. "He was human, a selfish, cowardly, and cruel human, but human nonetheless." He sat down on the concrete floor, leaning his back against the wall, and motioned for me to sit beside him. I did, too tired to keep standing. "You know what the saddest thing is," Ray continued, "that in the end, with all his money and his properties and his secrets, he died alone in a hospital. None of his women were there. None of his children were with him. Only Emma, the employee he paid to keep his lies. Emma took care of him until the end," I remembered the elderly woman's words in the hotel lobby. Ray nodded. "She was the only loyal person he had. And it wasn't even for love. It was for misguided loyalty and the 33 years of salary he gave her. But at least he had the decency to fulfill his last wish, to give you that envelope, to make sure you knew the truth." We sat in silence for several minutes. The warehouse was cold, the humidity seeping through the cracks in the metal. But there was something comforting about sharing that desolate space with someone who understood exactly what I was feeling. "You said you had a proposal." I finally broke the silence. Ray straightened up and looked me directly in the eyes. "The 5 properties our father left are worth approximately $800,000 in total. According to the will, we are each entitled to $400,000. It is money neither of us needed, but which we now have." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My proposal is this. We sell the properties. We take that money and use it to do something our father never did. Something good." "Like what?" Ray smiled for the first time since I met him, and that smile completely transformed his face. "Emma needs money for her old age. She has worked her whole life and barely has enough to survive. We will give her $50,000. It's the least we can do for the woman who kept our father's secrets, but in the end helped us find each other." I nodded slowly. That made sense. It was fair. "The rest we divide, but not to spend it on ourselves. We use it to help other people. We can create a fund for single mothers who work cleaning houses, like our mothers. Women who are raising children alone, breaking their backs to give them an education. We give them scholarships. We give them opportunities. We do something meaningful with that dirty money." His eyes shone with intensity. "We turn the legacy of a liar into hope for people who really need it." Tears returned, but this time they were different. They were not of pain, but of something akin to peace. "Our father used that money to control and hurt," I said slowly. "We will use it to free and heal." Ray extended his hand toward me. "Do you agree?" I took his hand, rough and strong, and shook it firmly. "I agree." We got up from the floor, shaking off the dust and dampness. Ray began to gather the documents scattered on the table, organizing them into neat piles. "We will need a lawyer, someone to help us with the legal process of the will and the sale of the properties." I nodded. "I know someone, a neighbor who is a lawyer. She was always good to me." Ray smiled. "Perfect. Tomorrow we start the paperwork." Tomorrow. The word sounded strange. A few hours ago, I didn't have a tomorrow. I was destroyed, abandoned, without a future. And now I had a brother, a plan, and something like a purpose. "Ray," I said as we walked toward the warehouse exit, "thank you for waiting for me, for protecting me, for everything." He stopped at the door and looked at me with those eyes that were like my father's, but completely different in their warmth. "Don't thank me. We are family. And real family doesn't abandon you in a hotel lobby with a bill you can't pay. Real family waits in abandoned warehouses for 2 weeks just to make sure you are okay." His voice broke a little. "I spent my whole life without siblings. Now that I've found you, I'm not going to leave you alone, ever again." We left the warehouse together. The sky was completely dark now, dotted with stars that shone like promises. Ray closed the metal door and put the padlock back on. "This place has already fulfilled its purpose," he said. "We don't need to come back here anymore." We walked down the deserted industrial street, our steps synchronized without planning it. Ray walked me to the bus stop. The street was deserted, lit only by old lampposts that flickered with yellowish light. The cold of the night was beginning to seep through my clothes, and I hugged myself, trying to conserve warmth. He took off his denim jacket without saying anything and put it over my shoulders. It smelled of cheap detergent and honesty, so different from Michael's expensive perfumes and lies. "Where do you live?" Ray asked, his hands now in his pants pockets. I gave him my address. It was an old building on the north side, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I had paid for it with 30 years of hard work. It's far. I'll take you. I shook my head. I don't want to bother you anymore. He let out a short laugh. Sandra, I just spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned warehouse. Taking you home is no bother. His pickup truck was parked 2 blocks away. It was old, dirty white, with dents in the doors and a cracked windshield in one corner. But it started on the first try, purring with an engine that sounded well maintained. I got into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt, while Ray turned on the heater. The interior smelled of old coffee and the cheap air fresheners that hung from the rear-view mirror. He drove in silence for the first few minutes, concentrating on the city's night traffic. I looked out the window, watching the industrial streets gradually transform into residential areas. Families eating dinner behind lit windows, kids playing on the sidewalks under their parents' supervision. Normal lives, simple, honest. Everything I thought I had, and that turned out to be a carefully constructed illusion. What do you do for work? Ray's question pulled me out of my thoughts. I clean houses, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if I need extra cash. My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. Ray nodded slowly. My mother cleaned houses too. She worked until the cancer left her so weak she couldn't even hold a broom. She died with shattered hands and a broken back. She was 48 years old. The pain in his voice was so raw that it hurt my chest. My mother died at 52. Diabetes. She didn't have money for medicine. She kept working until she collapsed at one of her clients' houses. The owner didn't even call an ambulance. She just called me to come pick her up because she was dirtying her marble floor. The words came out bitter, loaded with a rage I had kept for 14 years. Ray hit the steering wheel with the palm of his hand, not hard, but with impotent frustration. Our mothers killed themselves working while our father accumulated properties. He could have helped them. He could have given us better lives. But he chose secrecy and control above everything else. He rubbed his eyes with one hand, as if trying to erase painful images. That's why I want to use that money to help other women, so that no other mother has to die cleaning the floors of people who don't even see her as human. What do you do for work? I asked, needing to shift the weight of the conversation a little. Ray smiled sadly. I'm a mechanic. I have a small shop on the south side. I fix old cars, the ones people with money no longer want. I don't earn much, but it's honest. Every cent that comes into my pocket, I earned with my own hands, not by stealing from anyone or lying to anyone. There was pride in his voice, a genuine pride that my son never had. Michael. The thought of him pierced me like a knife. My son, the child I raised, who I fed with food I didn't eat so he wouldn't go hungry. The child I walked to school every day for 12 years, walking in the sun and rain because we didn't have money for the bus. The child who cried in my arms when he had his first heartbreak, when he failed a test, when he felt rejected by the world. That child had become a cruel stranger who used me as a disposable tool. Do you think he will come back? The question came out before I could stop it. Ray didn't answer immediately. He kept driving, his hands firm on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road. Honestly, I don't know. Greed does strange things to people. He might accept that he lost and disappear, or he might try something desperate. He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. That's why I want you to have this. He took something from the compartment between the seats and handed it to me. It was a card with his phone number handwritten on it. If Michael tries to contact you, if he threatens you, if you feel you are in danger, you call me immediately, no matter the time. No matter the day, you call me, and I will go. The seriousness in his voice left no room for doubt. This man, who had only known me for a few hours, was willing to protect me, while my son, who had shared my life for 38 years, had planned my destruction. I put the card in my purse along with the documents from the warehouse. Ray, there's something I don't understand. He looked at me briefly before returning his gaze to the road. Why did our father write that will that way, with that clause about heirs trying to deceive others? If he spent his whole life lying and manipulating, why put a moral rule in his will? Ray exhaled slowly. I've thought a lot about that. I think in the end, when he knew he was dying, he had a moment of clarity. Or maybe cowardice. He didn't have the courage to tell us the truth in life, but he wanted to make sure that after his death, none of his children would destroy each other for his dirty money. It was his twisted way of protecting us, not from ourselves, but from each other. One last manipulation, I said bitterly. Even from the grave, he kept controlling. Ray nodded. But this time, his manipulation protected us. Without that clause, your son would have won. He would have destroyed you legally and kept everything. Our father, for the first time in his selfish life, did something that benefited us, even if it was by accident. We arrived at my building 20 minutes later. It was a grey, concrete block of 5 stories, with small balconies full of hanging laundry and pots with half-dead plants. It wasn't pretty, but it was home. Ray turned off the engine and turned to me. Will you be okay tonight? The question was loaded with genuine concern. I nodded, although I wasn't sure if it was true. I'll be fine. I have a lot to think about, but I'll be fine. I got out of the truck and returned his jacket. He took it, but didn't move. Sandra, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I have an appointment with my lawyer. Can you come? I want you to be there when we start the will process. I hesitated for a moment. Tomorrow I had work, 3 houses to clean. But this was more important. This was the future. I'll be there. Give me the address. Ray took out his cell phone and sent me the location by message. Then he got out of the truck and walked around the vehicle to where I was. He gave me a quick but firm hug. But Boatsen, you are going to get through it. All of this. The pain, the betrayal, the confusion. You are going to get through it because you are stronger than you think. He separated and looked me in the eyes. And you are not alone. Not anymore. You have me now. I climbed the stairs to my apartment on the 3rd floor. Every step was an effort after the longest day of my life. I opened the door and entered my small 2-room space. Everything was exactly as I had left it Friday morning, before Michael picked me up to take me to the hotel. The unwashed coffee cup in the sink, the newspaper open on the table, my unmade bed, as if time had frozen. But I was not the same person who had left that apartment 3 days ago. That Sandra was naive. She still believed in her son. She still lived in the illusion of a loving family. This Sandra knew the truth. About her father, about her son, about the fragility of blood ties when money and greed intervened. But she also knew something new. That family doesn't always come from where you expect. Sometimes it comes in the form of a brother you never knew, waiting in an abandoned warehouse to make sure you are okay. I collapsed onto the sofa without even taking off my shoes. The exhaustion was total, physical and emotional. I closed my eyes, and for a moment only the silence of my apartment and the slow beating of my heart existed. Tomorrow, the legal process would begin. Tomorrow, I would face the consequences of everything I had discovered. But tonight, I just needed to breathe. My cell phone vibrated in my purse. I took it out expecting a message from Ray. But it wasn't him. It was Michael. The message shone on my cell phone screen like an open wound. Mum, we need to talk. Please give me a chance to explain. It's not what you think. I love you. Your son, Michael. I read the words once, twice, 3 times. Each reading turned my stomach harder. I love you. Those 2 words that had meant everything to me for 38 years now sounded hollow, empty, like fake coins trying to pass for gold. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to answer. The part that was still a mother, that remembered the little boy who used to hug my legs when he was afraid of the dark. But another part, the part that had matured painfully in the last few hours, knew that answering would be opening a door that needed to remain closed. Michael didn't want to explain. He wanted to manipulate. It was the only thing he knew how to do now. I blocked his number. The act was simple, just 3 taps on the screen, but it felt like cutting an umbilical cord that had been connected for almost 4 decades. I cried while doing it. Silent tears that rolled down my cheeks and fell onto the cell phone screen, distorting the letters. I was mourning the death of something that probably never really existed. The son I loved was an illusion. The real man was a cruel stranger. I got up from the sofa and walked to the window. From the 3rd floor I could see the street, half lit by lampposts that needed repair. A stray dog dug through the trash. A young couple walked hand in hand. Life went on, indifferent to my pain. I wondered how many people in those grey buildings were living their own silent tragedies. How many mothers had been betrayed by their children? How many family secrets were hidden behind those lit windows? The cell phone vibrated again. This time it was an unknown number. My heart raced. I hesitated before opening the message. Sandra, it's Danielle. Please listen to me. Michael is desperate. We made a mistake. We can fix this. You would forgive us, wouldn't you? You are his mother. Mothers always forgive. The fury I felt was so intense that I had to sit down to keep from falling. Danielle, the woman who had planned my humiliation as if it were a fun game, was now asking for forgiveness, not out of remorse, but because they had lost. I blocked that number too. Then I turned off the cell phone completely and left it on the table. I needed silence. I needed to think. I walked to my bedroom and collapsed onto the bed without undressing. The sheets smelled of cheap fabric softener and loneliness. I closed my eyes trying to sleep, but my mind was a whirlwind of images and memories that mixed with the recent reality. I saw 5-year-old Michael, crying because the kids at school made fun of his used clothes. I hugged him then and promised him that someday he would have new things. I saw 15-year-old Michael proud when he won his first science award. I had worked a double shift that week to pay for his project materials. I saw 25-year-old Michael introducing me to Danielle, telling me she was the love of his life. I had cried with happiness because I thought my son had found companionship. All those memories were now contaminated. Every hug, every smile, every I love you, Mum now had a shadow of doubt. When did he start to change? When did he stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as an obstacle? Was it when he discovered my father's properties? Or was there always something dark in him that I didn't want to see? The questions tormented me without offering answers. Finally, around 3 o'clock in the morning, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. I dreamed of my father. We were in a house I didn't recognize, huge and empty. He walked ahead of me, always out of reach, no matter how fast I ran. Every room I opened was full of photographs of people I didn't know, whole families smiling at the camera. And in every photograph, my father was there, with his arm around different women, different children. all his secret lives hanging on the walls like trophies. I woke up startled at 6 o'clock in the morning, my heart racing and the sheets soaked with sweat. The grey light of dawn filtered through the window. I got up with an aching body, as if I had fought a physical battle during the night. I went to the bathroom and washed my face with ice-cold water, trying to wake up, to return to reality. The woman looking back at me from the mirror looked 10 years older. Deep, dark circles, cracked lips, more pronounced wrinkles. Pain aged you. I made coffee as the sun finished rising. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around the hot mug, letting the steam warm my face. Today I had to go with Ray to the lawyer. Today the process of untangling my father's inheritance officially began. Today I had to be strong. But right now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I allowed myself to be fragile. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal. At 8 o'clock, I turned on my cell phone. There were 15 messages from Michael from different numbers. I didn't open them. I deleted them all without reading. There were 5 missed calls from Danielle. I ignored them too. And there was one message from Ray, sent at 7 o'clock in the morning. Good morning. Sandra, I hope you were able to rest a little. I'll be waiting for you at 10 o'clock. We are going to start fixing this together. Your brother, Ray, your brother. Those 2 words filled me with a strange warmth. I had never had siblings. I was always an only child. But now I had Ray, a man who protected me when he could have ignored me, who offered me an alliance when he could have seen me as competition, who called me sister after knowing me for barely a day. Family doesn't always come from the expected place. Sometimes it comes from the shadows of an abandoned warehouse. I showered, put on my most presentable clothes, a dark grey dress I used for special occasions, and carefully did my hair. I needed to look dignified. I needed to feel in control, even if inside I was chaos. At 9:30, I took the bus toward downtown New York, where the lawyer's office was. The journey was long, the morning traffic dense and noisy, but I used that time to prepare myself mentally. Ray was already waiting outside the building when I arrived. He wore black pants and a white shirt, freshly ironed. He looked nervous, but determined. He smiled when he saw me approach. I thought maybe you would change your mind. I shook my head. No, I need to do this. For me, for my mother, for all the truths that were never told. He nodded and offered me his arm. I took it, and together we entered the building. The office was on the 5th floor. Beige walls, framed diplomas, bookcases full of legal codes. The lawyer was a man about 50 years old, with thick glasses and a serious expression. His name was James. He greeted us with a formal handshake and invited us to sit in leather chairs across from his dark wood desk. Mr. Ray explained the basic situation over the phone, James began, opening a thick folder. But I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Every detail is important. For the next hour, Ray and I told him everything. Our father's secret families, the will with the special clause, Michael's plan to destroy me and keep the inheritance, the evidence Ray had collected, the documents from the warehouse, everything. James took notes meticulously, asking specific questions, requesting clarifications. His face remained neutral, professional, but I could see his eyebrows occasionally rise at the most shocking details. This is complex but manageable, James finally said, closing his notebook. The clause in the will is clear. If we can prove that Michael attempted to dispossess Sandra through deceit, he automatically loses any right to the inheritance. The evidence Ray collected is solid. Emails, text messages, bank transfers. It will be enough. He looked at me directly. But I need to ask you something, Ms. Sandra. Are you prepared for this? Proceeding legally means your son will face consequences, possibly criminal charges. Are you ready for that? The question hit me like a punch. Was I ready to see my son face criminal charges? The mother in me screamed no, that we find another way, that I forgive him. But the woman who had been humiliated, betrayed, and used knew there was no other option. I am ready, I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. My son made his choices. Now he must face the consequences. James nodded in approval. He began to explain the legal process to us. First, he would present the evidence to the notary in charge of the will. Then, a formal hearing would be called, where all the heirs would be summoned. Michael would have the opportunity to defend himself, but with the amount of evidence Ray had collected, his options were limited. The entire process will take between 4 and 6 weeks, James said, organizing the documents on his desk. But I can tell you in advance that the result is almost certain. Michael will lose his rights. The inheritance will be divided between the two of you. Ray and I exchanged glances. We want to do something specific with that money, I said. We don't want to keep all of it. We want to create a fund to help single mothers who work cleaning houses, give their children scholarships, financial support, opportunities. James took off his glasses and looked at us with an expression he hadn't shown before. Respect, even admiration. That is extraordinary. I can help you establish a legal foundation. Ensure that the money is used correctly, that it reaches those who really need it. We spent another hour discussing the details. What would the foundation be called? How would we select the beneficiaries? What percentage of the money would be allocated to educational scholarships, and what percentage to direct financial support? Ray suggested calling it the Ellen and Victoria Foundation, in honor of our mothers. I nodded with tears in my eyes. It was perfect. Our mothers, who died broken and forgotten, would now have a legacy that would help other women avoid the same fate. When we left the office, it was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was shining brightly, and the city was bustling with life. Ray invited me to eat something. We found a small family restaurant 2 blocks away, with plastic tables and a handwritten menu on a chalkboard. We ordered turkey chili and soda. We ate in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. "Do you think our mothers would be proud?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. Ray put down his spoon and looked at me directly. "I think they would be more than proud. They would be astonished. Their children, who grew up separate, who never knew about each other, found each other and decided to turn pain into hope. That's more than our father did in his whole life." He was right. Our father spent decades accumulating properties and secrets, building walls between his families. We, in less than 24 hours, had decided to tear down those walls and use his resources to build something better. "Are you afraid of the hearing?" Ray asked. I thought about the question honestly. Yes, I will have to see Michael face to face, hear his justifications, his lies, watch him try to manipulate everyone as he always has. But I also know I have to do it, not for revenge, but for justice, to close this chapter and be able to move forward. Ray nodded slowly. "I will be there, by your side, throughout the hearing. You won't face it alone." We finished eating and walked through downtown New York with no specific destination. We passed by shops, parks, street vendors. People surrounded us, each person living their own complex story. "Do you know what the strangest thing about all this is?" I said as we sat down on a bench under the shade of a huge tree. "That if Michael hadn't been so greedy, if he hadn't betrayed me in such a cruel way, I never would have known the truth. I never would have gone to that warehouse. I never would have met you." Ray let out a bitter laugh. It's ironic. His betrayal united us. His plan to destroy you ended up creating something he never expected. A real family. We sat there for almost an hour, just talking, sharing memories of our separate, but strangely similar, childhoods. Our mothers' struggles, the sacrifices, the moments of hunger and cold, the small triumphs we celebrated as if they were huge. We discovered we had more in common than just blood. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures, meetings with James, and preparation for the hearing. Michael tried to contact me countless times. Messages from new numbers, letters left at my door. He even showed up once in front of my building. But I didn't give in. Ray had given me an emergency whistle and the number of a police friend. Every time Michael approached, we documented it. More evidence of harassment for the legal case. Danielle tried a different tactic. She posted a fake story on social media about how I was a cruel mother who was destroying her son for money. Some acquaintances wrote to me asking if it was true. I explained the real situation. Some believed me. Others chose Michael's side. I learned that in times of crisis, you discover who your real friends are. And the list was shorter than I expected. But I also discovered new allies. Emma, the hotel receptionist, visited me one afternoon. She brought homemade cookies and tea. We sat in my small living room, and she cried while asking me for forgiveness for telling Michael information months ago. I didn't know he would use it to hurt you, she sobbed. I thought he was just interested in getting to know his grandfather. I hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault. She had been as much a victim of my father's secrets as any of us. The night before the hearing, I could barely sleep. I got up 3 times to get water. I checked my dark grey dress 5 times to make sure it was clean and ironed. I mentally rehearsed what I would say if I was asked to speak. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I finally gave up and made coffee. I sat by the window watching the city slowly wake up, the sky changing from black to grey to orange. Ray arrived at 8 o'clock to accompany me. He wore a dark suit that looked new, probably bought specifically for this occasion. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath. As ready as I can be. The hearing was at the Notary Building, an old but elegant construction in the historic downtown. We entered a large room with dark wood walls, padded chairs, and a long desk where the notary and lawyers would sit. Michael was already there. He looked haggard, with deep dark circles and a wrinkled suit. Danielle was by his side, perfectly made up, but with a tense expression. When they saw me enter, Michael stood up. "Mum, please," he began, but his lawyer pulled him back down. Ray squeezed my shoulder gently, and we sat on the opposite side of the room. The division was clear. Them on one side, us on the other. The notary entered, an older man with completely white hair and a stern expression. He sat down, reviewed the documents, and began the hearing. Over the next 2 hours, James presented all the evidence. The emails where Michael planned my humiliation, the bank transfers to private investigators, the text messages between him and Danielle, laughing at my naivete, the testimonies from Emma. Everything was there, exposed under the cold light of the legal room. Michael's lawyer tried to argue that everything was a misunderstanding, that his client was only investigating family history, that the hotel incident was a communication error. But his arguments sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence. The notary listened in silence, taking occasional notes, his expression impenetrable. When it was time for the involved parties to speak, Michael stood up. "I just wanted what belonged to me," he said, his voice trembling between rage and desperation. "My grandfather was rich and we lived in poverty. Why? Why did he keep all that while my mother cleaned houses until she broke? I had a right to that fortune. I needed it. I deserved it. He looked at me directly. And you, Mum, would never have done anything with that money. You would have wasted it on charity or kept it unused. I was going to do something great with it. I stood up, surprising myself. You are right about one thing, Michael. Your grandfather was rich and kept us in poverty. That was cruel and unfair. But your solution was to repeat his cruelty, to lie, to manipulate, to use people. You became him. My voice cracked, but I continued. I would have given you everything if you had asked me. Everything. But you chose to destroy me instead of trusting me. And that choice says more about who you are than about who your grandfather was. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. Danielle cried silently. The notary closed his folder with a dry thud. I have heard enough. The evidence is clear. Michael Henderson violated the clause of the will that prohibits deceit among heirs. Therefore, he loses all his rights to the inheritance of Robert Harrison. The entirety of the estate will be divided between the remaining legitimate heirs, Sandra Harrison and Ramon Harrison. He hit his wooden gavel against the desk. This hearing is closed. We left the notary office under a bright sun that seemed inappropriately cheerful. Ray hugged me tightly on the sidewalk. You did it. You faced him and won. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, sad. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost my son. We are going to turn that pain into something beautiful, Ray said, as if he could read my thoughts. We are going to help so many families that your son will never be able to erase the good we will do. 6 months later, the Ellen and Victoria Foundation officially opened. We had sold the 5 properties for a total of $820,000. We gave $50,000 to Emma, who cried for an hour when we handed her the check. The rest we divided. A portion for us to secure our futures, and the largest part for the foundation. In the first year, we granted 30 full scholarships to the children of domestic workers. We helped 50 mothers with emergency rent payments. We financed 3 small businesses for women who wanted to stop cleaning other people's houses. I never spoke to Michael again. I heard through others that he and Danielle divorced 6 months after the hearing, that he moved to another city, that he works in something that doesn't pay well. Part of me still hurts when I think of him. He is my son. That love is not completely erased. But I learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to destroy you. Sometimes the hardest love is the one that is exercised from a distance. Ray became my real family. We eat dinner together every Sunday. We celebrate birthdays. We cry on the anniversaries of our mothers' deaths. And we work together at the foundation, interviewing families, handing out scholarships, watching our father's dirty money finally do some good in the world. One day, while reviewing applications in my small apartment, Ray told me something I will never forget. Our father taught us how not to live. He showed us the wrong path so clearly that we had no choice but to choose the opposite. In that twisted sense, he gave us a gift. He gave us the certainty of what kind of people we didn't want to be. He was right. I didn't want to be like my father, keeping secrets and building empires on lies. I didn't want to be like my son, destroying others for greed. I wanted to be like my mother, like Ray's mother. Women who worked until they broke to give their children something better. Today, 3 years after that afternoon at the hotel where my world collapsed, I look back and see the path clearly. The pain was real. The betrayal was devastating. But from those ashes grew something unexpected. A brotherhood with a man who should have been a stranger, but became my anchor. A foundation that bears the names of 2 forgotten women and now helps hundreds. and a version of myself that is stronger, wiser, and finally free from the lies that defined my family for generations. My son left me broke at a luxury hotel, but an elderly receptionist gave me an envelope that changed my life. Inside, there was not just the key to a storage unit, there was the key to the truth. And although that truth shattered me, it also freed me. Now I walk through the world without the burden of secrets that were not mine, without the illusion of a perfect family that never existed, only with the imperfect but honest reality of who I am and what I choose to do with the time I have left. And that, I discovered, is worth more than any inheritance. There are moments in life that change you forever, moments where your heart breaks so hard that the sound is silenced. For me, that moment came on a Sunday afternoon when I woke up from a nap and discovered that my own hair had been cut without my permission. My name is Patricia Riley. I'm 58 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is something I never imagined I would experience. That afternoon, the sun was streaming through my bedroom window. I had slept for barely an hour. I was tired. I had spent the morning preparing a classic turkey and mashed potatoes for Sunday family dinner, just as I always did. My son, Ethan, and his wife, Lauren, lived in the house my late husband left me in the suburb of Westwood, a home with a backyard, bright red bougainvillea vines, and that faint smell of old lumber that never completely goes away. When I opened my eyes, I felt something strange, a different weight on my head. I ran my hands through my hair and it wasn't there. Well, it was there, but not like before. My long hair, which reached my waist and which I had cared for over more than 30 years, was short, very short, shoulder length, uneven, as if someone had taken scissors to it without any care at all. I jumped up. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might faint. I ran to the bathroom mirror, and there it was. My hair, my beautiful hair that I brushed every morning with almond oil, was mutilated. I walked out of the bedroom, trembling. Ethan and Lauren were in the living room. She had a smile I still see when I close my eyes. What? What happened to my hair? I asked, my voice broken. Lauren crossed her arms and said, with that cold voice I already knew, "That's how you learn your place." I couldn't believe it. I looked at my son, my Ethan, the boy I carried in my arms, the one I comforted at night when he had nightmares, the one I held when his father died. "Mom, don't overreact," he said without getting up from the armchair. "You were too old to have your hair that long. It made you look out of date. Lauren just wanted to help you." Help me. That word cut through me like a knife. I swallowed my tears. I went back to my bedroom. I closed the door. And there, in front of the mirror, with my ruined hair falling in uneven clumps on my shoulders, I made a decision. But that comes later, because what I did 3 days later brought them to their knees in front of me, crying, begging for forgiveness. And I still wonder if I did the right thing. Has anyone you trusted ever done something to you that you never imagined? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to know me. I need you to understand who I was before that Sunday afternoon. My full name is Patricia Riley Mendoza. I was born in Philadelphia, into a family of textile merchants. My father owned a store that sold fine fabrics downtown. I grew up among rolls of silk, linen, and Egyptian cotton. I learned from childhood that quality things are cared for, respected, and preserved. When I was 23, I met Robert Mendoza at a wedding. He was a civil engineer, 10 years older than me. A serious, hard-working man of his word. We got married 6 months later. It was one of those marriages that don't exist anymore, one that is built slowly, with coffee in the mornings and long conversations on the balcony. Robert and I bought the house in Westwood when Ethan was barely 2 years old. It was a two-story house, with a backyard where I planted bougainvilleas, jasmine, and a lemon tree that still bears fruit every spring. Ethan learned to walk there. We celebrated his birthdays there. Robert and I grew old together there. My hair, my long hair, was part of that life. Robert would braid it for me on Sundays while we watched old movies. He said it was the most beautiful thing about me. When he died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I decided never to cut it. It was my way of keeping him close. Every morning, as I brushed those long silver strands, I felt that Robert was still there, somewhere. Ethan was our only son. We loved him completely, maybe too much. When he finished high school, we paid for his private university. He studied business administration, though he never really found his path. He had several jobs. None of them lasted long. There was always a reason. The boss was unfair. The hours were too tough. The salary wasn't enough. Then he met Lauren at a party. She was younger, from a family outside of New Jersey. At first I thought she was nice. She talked a lot, laughed loudly, wore tight clothes and expensive perfumes. But there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't decipher. They got married quickly, very quickly, and when Ethan told me they needed a place to live while they got settled, I didn't hesitate. The house was big. I lived alone. I thought it would be wonderful to have company again, that I would prepare family meals on Sundays, that the house would once again smell of sweet rolls and brewed coffee in the mornings. I also began to help them financially. $2,000 monthly. It wasn't a small amount, but it didn't hurt me either. Robert left me a good pension and some savings. I thought, he's my son. It's my blood. Why do I need the money if not to help him? The first few months were good. Lauren cooked sometimes. Ethan hugged me and said, "Thank you, Mum. I don't know what we'd do without you." But little by little, something changed. Lauren started making comments, small, subtle, like invisible needles. "Oh, mother-in-law, are you going out like that? That dress is out of style." "Patricia, no offense, but your cooking is very traditional. People eat lighter now. Do you still use that cream? There are much better ones at the spa I go to." Ethan didn't say anything. He just nodded, or worse, laughed. And I kept silent. Because a mother always finds a way to justify her children. I thought, they're young, they're stressed, they're adjusting. But that afternoon, when I woke up without my hair and heard those words, cold as ice, "That's how you learn your place," I knew there was no possible justification anymore. Something inside me broke. And when something breaks in a 58-year-old woman who has given everything, who has loved without limits, who has forgiven tirelessly, it doesn't repair in the same way. Did you ever allow someone to cross your boundaries just for love? Write it in the comments. You are not alone. Fractures never happen all at once. They arrive as small cracks in a wall you thought was solid. And when you finally realize it, it's too late. The wall is about to fall. That Sunday night, after what happened with my hair, I didn't leave my bedroom. I didn't go down for dinner. I didn't want to see anyone. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling, picking up the strands of hair that had fallen onto the pillow. There was so much. Long, silver, soft clumps. 30 years of care, loosely clutched on the white comforter Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary. I heard laughter downstairs. Laughter. Lauren and Ethan were watching television as if nothing had happened, as if cutting a woman's hair while she sleeps was normal, something unimportant. I tried to cry, but I couldn't. There was something stronger than tears, Something cold and dense was settling in my chest. I didn't know what it was yet, but I felt it growing. The next morning, Monday, I got up early. I looked in the mirror again. My hair was still there, short, uneven, like an open wound. I tried to fix it with my hands, but there was no way. I would have to go to a salon. I would have to explain to someone what had happened. And that embarrassed me. How do you tell a stylist that your own daughter-in-law cut your hair while you were sleeping? How do you explain that your son did nothing to stop it? I walked down the stairs slowly. Lauren was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, looking at her cell phone. She was wearing a pink silk robe that I had never seen before. Surely expensive, surely bought with the money I gave them every month. "Morning, mother-in-law," she said without looking up. I didn't answer. I poured my coffee in silence. My hands were shaking so much that I spilled a little on the table. Lauren sighed. "Oh, Patricia, don't take it so personally. It was just hair. It'll grow back." Just hair. 30 years of memories, 30 years of Robert braiding it carefully, 30 years of identity. And to her, it was just hair. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream that she had no right, that this was my house, that I was supporting them. But the words wouldn't come out. I stood there in front of the stove, feeling the coffee cool in my hands. Ethan came down half an hour later. He was freshly showered, wearing that cologne he always used and which I bought him every Christmas. He saw me and smiled. "Morning, Mum. Sleep well?" Sleep well. As if nothing, as if my life hadn't changed the day before. "Ethan," I said with the firmest voice I could manage, "I need to talk to you." He poured himself orange juice. He sat down at the table. "Tell me. What happened yesterday, what Lauren did, was not okay." Lauren looked up from her cell phone. Her eyes narrowed. "What wasn't okay, mother-in-law? Helping you look better? Getting rid of that outdated old lady look?" "You didn't ask my permission," I said, feeling my voice break. "You came into my bedroom while I was sleeping. You cut my hair without my consent. That's not helping, that's—" "That's what?" Lauren asked, standing up. "Violence? Abuse? Please, Patricia, don't exaggerate. I did you a favor. And if you can't see that, the problem is yours." I looked at Ethan. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, to say, "Lauren, my mum is right. What you did was wrong." But he didn't say any of that. "Mum," he said in a tired tone, "seriously, that's enough. It's over. Don't turn this into a drama. Lauren just wanted to help you. Besides, you were too old to have your hair that long. It was, I don't know, weird. Weird. My hair, my identity, my way of keeping Robert alive. It was weird. I felt something detach inside me, like when an old root lets go of the earth, and there's no way to plant it again." I didn't say anything else. I went upstairs. I grabbed my purse. I left the house. I walked to the avenue and took a cab. I asked the driver to take me to the hair salon, where I had been going for years. A small, discreet place, where Mrs. Martha always treated me with kindness. When I walked in, Martha saw me and her face changed. "Oh, Patricia, what happened?" I told her everything, word for word. And as I spoke, I felt the tears finally begin to fall. I cried as I hadn't cried in 5 years, since Robert's death. Martha didn't say anything. She just hugged me. Then she sat me down in the chair. She washed my hair with warm water and lavender oil, and she began to fix it. "We can't save everything," she said softly, "but I'm going to make it look the best I can." When she finished, I looked in the mirror. It wasn't me anymore. Or rather, it was a version of me I didn't know. The short hair, barely below my ears, made me look different, older, vulnerable, but also something else, something I didn't understand yet. "Thank you, Martha," I said. She squeezed my shoulder. "Patricia, listen to me closely. I've seen a lot in my life, and what they did to you is not normal. It's not love, it's control. And if you don't set boundaries now, they are going to keep taking pieces of you until there's nothing left." Her words stayed with me all the way back home. When I arrived, the living room was empty. I went up to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the bed. I took a manila envelope from my dresser where I kept important documents, deeds, bank papers, my will. And there, in silence, I began to read. The house was in my name, completely. Robert left it to me in the will. Ethan had no legal right to it. None. I also checked my bank statements, the $2,000 monthly I transferred to Ethan's account. 12 months a year, $24,000 total over the 2 years they had been living with me. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And I made a decision. But I wouldn't act immediately. No, that would be emotional, impulsive. I wasn't like that. I had learned from Robert that important decisions are made with a cool head, with clarity, with strategy. I would wait 3 days. 3 days to make sure this wasn't just pain. 3 days to confirm that there was no turning back. 3 days to see if Ethan, my only son, the boy I had carried in my arms, would apologize, if he would show even a little remorse. But deep down, I already knew the answer. That night, during dinner, Lauren prepared pasta. She sat at the table as if she were the owner of the house. Ethan talked about a new business he wanted to start. He needed money, more money. I ate in silence. I watched them. I laughed when it was time to laugh. I nodded when it was time to nod. But inside, something had changed, and they didn't know it yet. As I tell all this, I think about where you might be listening to me. Type the name of your city in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. The next 2 days were strange, like living in a play where everyone pretended that nothing had happened. I pretended everything was fine. Lauren pretended she had done me a favor. And Ethan pretended that his mother wasn't broken inside. On Tuesday morning, I woke up early as always. I prepared breakfast. Ranchero eggs, refried beans, freshly made tortillas. The smell filled the whole house. It was a smell that reminded me of my childhood, of mornings in Philadelphia, of when my mother taught me to cook on that clay griddle. Lauren came down at 10. She was wearing one of those designer pajamas they sell at luxury department stores. She sat at the table and looked at the plate I had served her. "Oh, mother-in-law, beans again. I told you I'm watching my figure. This has too many calories." I didn't say anything. I took the plate away. I prepared a green smoothie for her, just the way she liked it. Strawberries, spinach, banana, almond milk. I blended it slowly, feeling how every movement of my hands was mechanical, automatic. She didn't even say thank you. Ethan appeared half an hour later. He kissed Lauren on the forehead. He barely looked at me. "Mum, can you iron my blue shirt? I need it for an interview." "Of course, son." I went up to his bedroom. The bed was unmade. Clothes were strewn on the floor, empty water bottles on the nightstand. I picked up everything. I made the bed. I ironed the shirt. I folded his clean clothes. And as I did it, I asked myself, when did I stop being his mother and become his maid? When did that happen? I didn't remember the exact moment. It had been gradual, so gradual that I didn't notice. First it was, Mum, can you help me with this? Then it was, Mum, do this for me. And finally it was, Mum, I need you to do this. Now. And I always said yes, because that's what mothers do, right? They sacrifice themselves, they disappear, they become shadows so their children can shine, or so I believed. That afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I found something under the sofa, a real estate magazine. It was marked with yellow marker on several pages. Condos in Manhattan, houses in Brooklyn, high prices, very high. There was a handwritten note in the margin, Lauren's handwriting. With the sale of the old lady's house, this is perfectly affordable. 3 bedrooms, terrace, gym. Ethan, what do you think? The old lady. That's what she called me. And they were planning to sell my house, the house Robert and I bought together, the house where my son grew up, the house where my memories were, my bougainvilleas, my lemon tree. They wanted to sell it. I slowly closed the magazine. I put it back under the sofa, exactly where I had found it. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I didn't feel like crying anymore. I felt something worse, something cold, something I had never felt before. Clarity. That night I prepared dinner, chicken and dumplings, white rice, handmade biscuits. It took me 3 hours. 3 hours where my hands moved on their own, where my mind went over that phrase written in yellow marker again and again, with the sale of the old lady's house. When Ethan and Lauren sat down for dinner, I observed them. I really observed them, as if I were seeing them for the first time. Lauren ate quickly, checking her cell phone between bites. Ethan talked about the job interview. It hadn't gone well. It never went well. There was always an excuse. The guy was an idiot, Mum. He asked me absurd things, as if I didn't know how to do my job. Relax, son. Something better will come along. He sighed. Yeah, but in the meantime, Mum, do you think you could increase the help a little this month? We need to buy some things for the house. For the house. My house. The one they wanted to sell. I smiled. How much do you need? I don't know. About $500 extra. Just this month. Just this month. The same phrase I had heard for the last 6 months. Sure, son. I'll transfer it to you tomorrow. Lauren looked up from her cell phone and stared at me. There was something in her eyes, something close to triumph, as if she had won something. Thank you, mother-in-law. You're very generous. Generous. We finished dinner. I cleared the dishes. I washed everything. I cleaned the kitchen. I went up to my bedroom. And there, sitting on my bed, I took out the documents again. The deeds, the bank statements, Robert's will. There was a letter, too. A letter Robert left me before he died. He had written it when he knew his heart was failing, when he knew he didn't have much time left. I opened it carefully. I hadn't read it in months. My dear Patricia, if you are reading this, it is because I am no longer with you. And although it hurts me to leave you, I know you are strong. Stronger than you think. I leave the house to you because it is yours. We built it together. It is your sanctuary. Don't let anyone take it from you. Not even Ethan. Love him. Guide him. But don't let him consume you. Sometimes the greatest love we can give is to say no, because saying yes to everything is not love. It is fear. It is cowardice. Be brave, my love. Be the woman I always admired. Yours, always, Robert. I closed the letter. The tears finally came. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of shame, of recognition. Robert was right. I had been afraid. afraid that Ethan would leave me, afraid of being alone, afraid of losing the only piece of family I had left. And that fear had turned me into this, into a woman who allowed her hair to be cut while she slept, into a woman who cooked, cleaned, and paid bills while they called her the old lady and planned to sell her house. No more. Wednesday dawned cloudy. It had rained in the early hours, and the backyard smelled of wet earth. The red bougainvilleas glistened with raindrops, still clinging to their petals. I ate breakfast alone. Black coffee, no sugar. I needed to feel the bitter taste. I needed to stay awake, alert. Lauren appeared at noon. Mother-in-law, I'm going out. I'm going to the spa with some friends. Don't wait up for lunch. Have fun? Ethan left shortly after. Another interview. Another opportunity that probably wouldn't work out. I was alone in the house. And there, in the silence of my own living room, I picked up the phone. I dialed the number of my lawyer. Mr. Wallace, an older man who had worked with Robert for years. Mr. Wallace, it's Patricia Mendoza. Mrs. Patricia, how nice to hear from you. How are you? I need to see you tomorrow. It's urgent. Of course. What time works for you?